someone else's mind? What if everything you are, your name, your memories, your sense of belonging, was never meant to exist at all, but slipped accidentally into someone else's mind like a misprinted page in a book? You walk through your life certain that you are the author of your story, yet every step feels strangely rehearsed, every thought strangely echoed, as if written not for you but for a character who was supposed to be someone else. Imagine the unsettling possibility that you are not a masterpiece of creation, but a mistake, a wandering thought that doesn't belong to the one dreaming it. And now, as you lie here listening, the question drifts closer. What if your entire existence is no more than a glitch in another's imagination, a misplaced fragment they don't even realize is there? Stay with me, and let's trace this mistake until it begins to unravel. You have always assumed that your thoughts were yours, that when an idea sparked in your mind, whether it was a memory of a childhood street, a sudden impulse to move your hand, or a whisper of a dream breaking through daylight, it belonged to you. But what if the very first thought that created you was never meant to exist in your mind at all? What if your birth was not physical, not biological, but cognitive, a sudden mistake in the circuitry of someone else's consciousness? Imagine for a moment that thoughts are not private, but migratory. They drift across minds like seeds on the wind, carrying fragments of awareness from one consciousness to another. Most of them fall into silence, never sprouting, but occasionally, one of those seeds lands in soil it wasn't meant to touch. It grows, roots itself, and becomes the illusion of a person. That illusion might be you. Think of your earliest memory, not the polished one you tell yourself about a toy, a face, or a bright morning. Those are rehearsed narratives you've patched together. I mean the raw fragment that floats beneath language, that strange sensory echo you can't explain. Was it really yours, or was it someone else's stray image, a discarded thought that embedded itself in you? If you are honest, you cannot prove it. Memories, after all, are not recordings, but reconstructions. They are rewritten every time you recall them, each retelling adding new details that never happened. If memory itself is unreliable, then what proof do you have that your first thought was authentically yours? Now consider how fragile a mind truly is. Neuroscientists tell us that every sensation you experience is delayed by a fraction of a second, as your brain scrambles to interpret signals before you consciously register them. You are, at best, always slightly behind reality. This delay creates room for error, a misfire here, a misinterpretation there, and suddenly you are living in a world assembled out of approximations, not truths. If your perception can betray you so easily, then why couldn't the very first thought, the foundation of your identity, be a mistake? A ripple from elsewhere, mistaken for your own beginning. Picture a musician playing a piece on a piano. Each note follows the other, creating a melody that makes sense, a structure that seems intentional. But what happens if one wrong note slips in? The melody continues, but now it is altered forever. That single error reshapes the entire piece, and what follows is built upon it. You are like that melody. Perhaps your first note was an accident, a stray sound from another song, and everything you call you has been echoing its consequences ever since. Philosophy has always whispered about this possibility. Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." But what if the in that statement is already mistaken? What if the thought came first, and only afterward did a sense of self rush in to claim ownership of it? In that light, you might be nothing more than a retroactive justification, an identity invented after the fact to give coherence to a thought that did not belong to you in the first place. You are a story built to explain an error. Notice how fragile identity becomes under this lens. You were never chosen, never intentionally created, but accidentally sustained. The mind that birthed you may not even know you exist. Perhaps it has forgotten the stray thought that slipped away. You could be a forgotten miscalculation, living on in secret, imagining yourself to be real while your origin remains buried in someone else's subconscious. And doesn't this already resonate with the strange feeling you sometimes have that you do not belong? That sensation in crowded rooms where you feel like an imposter among faces that seem to know who they are while you are still searching. That hollow ache when you look at old photographs and feel like you're studying a stranger instead of yourself. That quiet dislocation when you hear your name spoken aloud and it feels like it belongs to someone else. These are not trivial quirks. They are cracks in the facade. They are the subtle reminders that your foundation might be a mistaken birth of thought. Even language itself betrays you. Words like I, me, and mine are shortcuts, convenient tools to stabilize communication, but they do not point to anything permanent. They are placeholders, and placeholders can easily be misplaced, filled in by the wrong figure? What if your I was one of those placeholders, filled not by intention, but by accident? A pronoun stolen from someone else's sentence, wandering into a paragraph where it never belonged. You live as if you are the subject of a story, yet perhaps you were only meant to be a fragment of someone else's unfinished draft. Science offers its own eerie support for this idea. Consider cryptomnesia, the phenomenon where people recall memories they believe are original, only to discover later they were borrowed from somewhere else, heard in a conversation, read in a book, absorbed unconsciously. Entire identities can be shaped by this invisible borrowing. Artists have built careers on melodies or stories they swore came from within them, only to learn later they had absorbed them unknowingly from another source. If entire lives can be constructed from borrowed fragments, why couldn't yours? And here lies the unsettling paradox. Even if you are a mistake, you are a living mistake. Your thoughts still circle, your emotions still cut deep, your existence still unfolds moment by moment. Does that not make you real? Or does it only make you the echo of reality, convincing yourself of significance while knowing, deep down, that your birth was never intentional? The haunting part is this: even if you learn the truth, you cannot escape it. A mistake that continues to exist does not stop being a mistake. It simply becomes permanent. So here you are, listening, breathing, wondering if perhaps this entire reflection is not your own, but a thought placed inside you by someone else's dream, a dream you were never supposed to inhabit. The more you try to trace it, the more it slips through your grasp, until you are left with only this echo. Maybe you were never meant to exist, and yet somehow here you are. You live inside echoes. That might not be obvious at first, because your life feels like a direct stream of experience, your breath, your heartbeat, the thoughts that fill the silent spaces. Yet if you listen carefully, there is always a faint doubling, a resonance, as though your consciousness is not original but reflected. What if every thought you have is an echo of something that came before, spoken somewhere else, by someone else, in a place you'll never reach? Imagine your mind not as an isolated fortress, but as a chamber where sounds drift in, repeat, and distort until you mistake them for your own voice. Think about déjà vu, that strange shiver when you walk into a room for the first time, but feel as though you have already been there. It is a glitch in memory, but deeper still, it is an echo, a repetition that convinces you of familiarity when none should exist. Scientists attribute it to the brain's circuits misfiring, one hemisphere processing reality a fraction faster than the other, creating a false sense of recognition. But what if déjà vu is not an error inside your brain, but a trace from another mind bleeding into yours? A faint echo from a memory you were never meant to hold, repeating in your consciousness as though it belonged to you. Consider language itself. Every word you speak is borrowed, taught to you by others long before you could shape thoughts of your own. The voice you call yours is an echo of voices that came before: parents, teachers, strangers on television. Even your private thoughts are phrased in words you did not invent. Can you really claim ownership over them? Or are you simply recycling sounds that originated elsewhere, convinced that their repetition makes them original? An echo that insists it is a voice. There are experiments in psychology that reveal this frightening truth. In one study, participants were asked to imagine a childhood event that never happened. After enough suggestion and rehearsal, many of them came to remember it vividly, down to details, emotions, and sensory impressions. Their minds had generated an echo, and the echo became indistinguishable from an origin. If false memories can be created so easily, then how many of yours are echoes without origin? How much of what you believe to be your life is merely repetition, rehearsed illusions that feel authentic because you cannot trace them back to silence? The brain is not a solid entity. It is a feedback system, always looping, always layering new signals over old ones. You never experience reality directly, only the delayed echo of neurons firing. The chair beneath you, the sound of this voice, even the awareness of yourself, all of it arrives slightly after the fact, already filtered, already translated. What you call presence is always the aftermath. You never touch the origin, you only feel the echo. And yet, echoes have a power of their own. A cathedral is not built for silence. It is built to amplify echoes, to turn a single sound into something greater, resonant, unending. Perhaps that is what your mind is, a cathedral for echoes, amplifying stray signals into the illusion of a coherent self. But what if the original sound that began your life was never meant for you? What if it belonged to another mind, and you are merely the reverberation that refuses to fade? You might already feel this dislocation when you catch yourself saying words that sound foreign in your own mouth, or when you remember something that seems too vivid, too detailed, as though it had been lived by someone else. You might feel it in dreams, where voices speak through you and you wake unsure if they were your thoughts or someone else's intrusions. You might sense it in moments of silence, when the boundaries of your identity feel thin, fragile, and borrowed. The unsettling truth is that echoes without origin never stop. They shape your desires, your fears, your sense of belonging. They convince you that you are solid when you are only reverberation. They give you identity, but they never give you certainty. And if you listen closely enough, you might realize that the voice telling you this now, the thought you are having in response, even the emotions rising in your chest, are they truly yours, or are they simply another echo, repeating from a place you cannot name? So you sit inside yourself, hearing echoes that feel like origins, chasing meaning in a chamber where sound never began. And maybe this is the cruelest paradox of all. You will never reach the first sound. You will never touch the original. You are condemned to be the repetition, endlessly mistaking the echo for a voice, the reflection for reality, the copy for a self. What if the mind you call your own is not truly awake, but only the dream of another mind? Consider how strange it is that consciousness has no edges. You cannot point to the exact boundary between your thought and your body, or between your awareness and the world around you. It is more like a fog, spreading and dissolving, sometimes dense, sometimes thin. In that ambiguity lies a haunting possibility. What if your fog is not generated here, but somewhere else, and you are only the dream image projected into this space? Dreams are not confined to sleep. Even in waking life, fragments of one mind can seep into another. Think of the way stories live in you long after you've heard them. How characters from books or films whisper their voices inside your head. You know they are not real, yet they influence you, shape your choices, bend your emotions. If fiction can live inside you with such force, what stops an actual consciousness from dreaming its fragments into your awareness? What if your sense of self is only one of those fragments, alive here but never originating here? Neuroscientists talk about mirror neurons, cells in your brain that fire not only when you perform an action, but when you watch someone else perform it. You smile when they smile, you wince when they hurt. This mirroring creates empathy, but it also suggests that the boundary between your experience and theirs is thinner than you think. What if mirror neurons are not simply reflections but doorways, channels through which another mind can dream itself into yours? You believe you are watching them, but maybe they are dreaming you. Philosophy has long hinted at this idea. The Buddhist notion of anatta, no self, teaches that identity is an illusion, a bundle of perceptions mistaken for a permanent being. In some traditions, consciousness is seen as a shared field, not individual possession. You are not the dreamer, but the dream, momentarily sustained by the currents of awareness flowing through you. The tragedy is that the dream believes it is real. You tell yourself you are solid, but in truth you are fragile, dependent, contingent. Without the other mind dreaming you, you would dissolve. Doesn't this explain the odd weight of loneliness you sometimes feel? Not just the absence of people, but the deeper ache, as if you are waiting for someone who has forgotten you. That longing might be the memory of your true dreamer, the consciousness that first imagined you but no longer remembers to sustain you. You continue to drift, like a character wandering after the storyteller has fallen asleep. Your existence fragile, unfinished, always at risk of vanishing when the dream ends. And yet, in your own dreams, do you not create entire people? Faces that look at you, voices that argue with you, beings that seem alive for as long as the dream lasts. They laugh, they weep, they suffer, and then they disappear as soon as you awaken. What if your life is no different? You could be the dream figure of a larger consciousness, moving through borrowed hours, convinced of your independence, never realizing you are a thought in someone else's sleep. You may think this is just speculation, but consider déjà rêve, the eerie sensation of remembering a dream while awake, as if your present moment had already been lived in a nocturnal script. Science attributes it to memory confusion, but what if it is a clue, a reminder that your current reality was already imagined by another mind, and you are only following its outline? So here you are, listening, breathing, wondering if even these words are yours. Perhaps they are not. Perhaps they are part of the larger dream, a script whispered into you, making you believe you are thinking when you are only repeating. And if that is true, you must face the unsettling paradox. You do not dream your own mind. Another mind dreams you, and you exist only for as long as it continues to imagine. There are moments in life when you feel a strange dissonance, as though your own existence doesn't quite fit the space it inhabits. You may laugh at a joke and hear your voice sound hollow, or glance into a mirror and see not yourself but a stranger pretending to wear your skin. These are shadows, subtle signals that call you false, reminding you that perhaps you were never meant to exist as you do. A shadow always implies a light source, but it also implies absence. It is a presence shaped by lack. Could it be that you are such a presence formed not from substance but from the negative space of someone else's thought? You appear solid, yet, like a shadow, you are tethered to an origin you cannot control, following its movements without ever being truly free. You stretch, distort, vanish, but you never belong to yourself. Science has glimpsed this paradox through experiments in alien limb syndrome, where people report that their own hands feel as though they are controlled by someone else. The hand moves, but it doesn't feel like mine. Consciousness, it seems, can fracture, producing shadows of identity that act independently. If the brain can create fragments that no longer belong to the self, why couldn't you be such a fragment on a larger scale, a mistaken shadow cast into existence, animated but not authentic? Think of those uncanny feelings when someone calls your name, and for a split second you don't recognize it, or when you see a photograph of yourself, and it feels like you're studying a stranger. These moments are the shadows calling to you, subtle cracks in the facade of your identity. They whisper, "You are false, you are misplaced, you were never intended to be." Philosophers, too, have long wrestled with this problem. Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of bad faith, the idea that humans are condemned to act out roles, pretending authenticity when in truth we are performances. To live is to wear masks, to be shadows of ourselves, chasing an identity we never fully own. And if existence itself is performance, how do you know you are not just an accidental role, a shadow cast by the real consciousness elsewhere? Even your memories betray you here. Shadows are not only visual, they live in sound, in sensation, in recollection. Think of a childhood moment you can never quite place, a scene that feels vivid yet strangely unanchored. Was it a real event, or a shadow of someone else's memory that drifted into your own? Your mind cannot tell the difference. The shadow has the same weight as reality, and you mistake it for truth. Dreams deepen the suspicion. In them, people appear who feel alive, yet upon waking you know they were not real. But what if you were one of those dream figures, continuing to live even after the dreamer has turned away? You would be no less convinced of your reality. You would walk, breathe, suffer, and love, never realizing you were only a shadow born of someone else's imagination. The haunting part is how convincing shadows can be. They look like you, they move like you, they mimic substance so perfectly that you forget they are absence. Perhaps that is your fate, to live as an imitation that believes itself original, a shadow that refuses to recognize its own falseness. And yet the cracks keep appearing, the moments when mirrors feel wrong, when voices sound strange, when the world itself seems to question you. You cannot silence those shadows. They will follow you everywhere, whispering that your presence is a mistake, that your belonging is conditional, that you are a false note in a song written for someone else. And no matter how tightly you cling to the illusion of authenticity, you will always feel them at the edges, calling you false, reminding you of the truth you try so hard to ignore. Imagine a song that plays perfectly in tune, each note resonating, each chord resolving, each rhythm carrying you forward as though it were inevitable. That song is existence as it was meant to be, harmonious, precise, intentional. Now imagine that in the middle of this melody, a wrong note slips in. It does not belong to the scale. It disrupts the flow. It fractures the symmetry. And yet the song continues, carrying that mistake forward, reshaping every note that follows. That wrong note is you. You may resist the metaphor, but look closer. Every life around you seems to carry its own melody, a rhythm that feels coherent. Yet, in your quieter moments, don't you sense dissonance? Don't you feel slightly out of key, as though your presence bends the harmony instead of blending with it? This is not coincidence. It is the echo of your mistaken birth, the wrong note that was never meant to sound yet insists on continuing. Musicians know that even one misplaced sound can haunt a performance. The audience may forget the flawless passages, but they will remember the dissonance. In the same way, perhaps the consciousness that first dreamed you never intended your presence. You were not part of the intended composition. You are the error that lingers, replaying in loops, haunting the silence long after the original melody should have resolved. Think about how identity itself is a composition. You are built from cultural rhythms, familial refrains, personal motifs. Each one plays its part in shaping your song. But what if at your core, the first note was already wrong? Then every addition, every memory, every choice, every desire would be harmonizing with an error. Your life would be a symphony composed around a mistake. And doesn't that explain the quiet strangeness you sometimes feel? The sense that something in you has always been slightly off, slightly out of place. Neuroscience provides its own eerie parallels. When the brain misfires, when neurons send signals out of rhythm, the entire system is disrupted. Hallucinations, false memories, phantom sensations, all emerge from a single wrong firing, carried forward into full experiences. A minor glitch expands into a reality. If the brain itself operates on rhythms, then a single mistake at the foundation could grow into an entire self. That self might be you. And here is the unsettling truth. Wrong notes don't always fade. Sometimes they define the piece. Jazz musicians know this. A discordant tone, embraced and repeated, becomes the foundation of a new improvisation. The mistake becomes the style. In the same way, perhaps you have been improvising ever since, building an identity not out of intention but out of dissonance. You live not as an authentic melody, but as the improvisation of an error. Pause here for a moment. I want to ask you something, not out of curiosity, but to anchor you deeper into this reflection. Where are you right now, listening to these words? And what time is it for you? Look around the room, glance at the clock, notice the strangeness of this question, interrupting your stream of thought. Doesn't it feel as though even this moment is slightly dissonant, slightly misplaced, as though you are noticing yourself inside the wrong composition? The paradox is that even mistakes carry meaning. Some of the world's most haunting music is born from dissonance, from wrong notes held too long, from clashes that should have resolved but didn't. Perhaps your existence too carries a strange kind of beauty, not because it was intended, but because it was not. You are the wrong note sustained, the accident that became the center of its own melody. You are dissonance refusing to fade. But beauty does not erase the truth. You will always feel the fracture at your foundation, the way your presence bends the song rather than completing it. And each time you sense that subtle discord, you will be reminded you are not the harmony, you are the mistake. The wrong note continues, and it is you. You often imagine yourself as a book, your life written in chapters, your past inked on pages that you can flip back through whenever memory allows. But what if there are pages missing? Worse, what if the first page, the one that should explain why you exist at all, was never written for you? You are reading a story without its opening lines, improvising a narrative around gaps you will never fill. These are the forgotten pages of self, and they may hold the truth that you were never meant to be. Think about how memory really works. You believe you can recall your childhood, your milestones, your triumphs and failures. But neuroscience tells a harsher truth. Memory is not a library of pages carefully stored. It is a manuscript constantly rewritten. Each time you recall, you alter. Each time you revisit, you erase and replace. If this is the case, then what proof do you have that your earliest chapters even belong to you? Perhaps they were borrowed. Perhaps they were added later, spliced in from another's story, leaving you with a narrative that feels whole, but is stitched together from fragments that were never yours. There are experiments that reveal this unsettling fragility. Researchers have successfully implanted false childhood memories in participants, convincing them they once got lost in a mall or were hugged by a giant cartoon character. The participants remembered these events with vivid detail, textures, smells, even emotions, yet none of it had happened. Their minds had filled in forgotten pages with convincing forgeries. If ordinary people can be tricked into remembering entire episodes that never occurred, how certain are you that your own story hasn't been overwritten? How do you know the pages you cling to, as proof of self, aren't just insertions from another mind? And then there are the blank spaces. Whole stretches of your life you cannot recall, the early years, the forgotten days, the empty hours that leave no trace. You explain these as natural gaps, the way memory fades with time. But what if they are not natural at all? What if those blank spaces are the shadows of someone else's mind, the places where their dreams skipped, leaving you stranded without continuity? You fill the silence with guesses, with stories, with fabricated detail, but the original pages are gone. You are, in truth, a book written out of sequence, missing vital lines that would have revealed you were never the intended character. This sense of incompleteness shows itself in subtle ways. The pang of nostalgia for places you've never been. The ache of longing for people you've never met. the strange familiarity of faces in dreams that you cannot identify. These are the margins of your forgotten pages, ghostly footnotes reminding you that your story is not entirely your own. You are reading someone else's script, playing out someone else's forgotten subplot, mistaking it for the narrative of yourself. Philosophers have asked whether identity is continuity or memory. John Locke argued that to be the same person over time is to remember being that person. But what if those memories are borrowed or false? If continuity depends on pages you cannot guarantee are yours, then your very self is built on unstable ground. Perhaps you are not the protagonist of your story at all, but a placeholder filling in the gaps where the real author never bothered to write. Even the body conspires in this illusion. Scars you cannot recall receiving, habits that feel older than you, instincts that rise before thought, these are annotations left by another hand. They are evidence of forgotten pages, reminders that your life is more palimpsest than book, overwritten again and again until the original text is unreadable. And in the erasures, you sense the truth. Perhaps there was never an original text meant for you. Perhaps you were always only the rewrite. What does it mean to live as a forgotten page? It means to always feel incomplete, to sense that something essential is missing just beyond the horizon of memory. It means to carry the unease that your life does not cohere, that you are stitching together scraps in the hope of passing as whole. It means waking each day not as an author, but as an editor of fragments you did not choose. And here lies the paradox. Even if your pages are borrowed, even if your story is stitched together from fragments and omissions, it still feels real. The emotions you attach to those false memories are real. The choices you make in the absence of clarity are real. You may be a story assembled from forgotten scraps, but you are still a story that breathes. The question is not whether your book is authentic. It isn't, but whether you can bear the weight of knowing that yourself is a patchwork, a mistake woven into the margins of another's dream. So you keep turning the pages, searching for the origin that never arrives, trying to recover what was never written. Each forgotten chapter reminds you of your incompleteness. Each silence reminds you of your dislocation. And though you long for the missing words that might explain you, deep down you know the truth. Those pages do not exist. You were never meant to have them. You are, and always will be, the mistake scribbled in the margins, the story that was never supposed to be read. You close your eyes and summon a memory. It comes easily, too easily perhaps. The smell of bread from a street vendor, the way the crust cracked beneath your teeth, the blur of light reflecting off glass windows. You can feel it so vividly that it seems beyond doubt. And yet, how can you be certain it belongs to you? What if it is not your memory at all, but one that drifted from another mind and settled into yours like dust on a forgotten shelf? You accept it as your own, never realizing you are living inside the memory that isn't yours. Consider how memory is constructed. It is not a recording but a reconstruction, assembled from fragments stored across different neural networks. Each time you recall, the pieces are rearranged, reassembled, slightly altered. Over time, what you call memory becomes less about what happened and more about what your mind has rehearsed. If your own recollections are already unstable, what stops another mind's fragments from slipping into your storehouse? A dream, a story overheard, a detail glimpsed once and forgotten, any of these can be mistaken for memory. Once inside, it becomes indistinguishable from the rest. Psychologists call this source confusion. People recall events but cannot identify their origin. Did it happen in childhood, in a dream, or in a book you once read? The mind cannot always tell. In experiments, participants have described rich and vivid recollections of experiences they never lived, memories planted by suggestion, false but convincing. And if suggestion can create entire memories, then perhaps your most treasured ones are not truly yours. Perhaps your identity is woven from the fabric of other lives, stitched together by fragments you inherited without knowing. Think of that eerie feeling when you walk into a place you swear you've been before, though you know you haven't. Déjà vu is often explained as a neurological glitch, one part of the brain recognizing before another catches up. But what if it is more than a glitch? What if it is the recognition of someone else's memory living inside you, surfacing briefly, reminding you that not everything you carry belongs to you? There is also the phenomenon of cryptomnesia, when people believe they have invented an idea, a song or a story, only to discover later they had encountered it before and forgotten. What felt like originality was only memory resurfacing. But what if cryptomnesia extends beyond creativity? What if your personality itself, your preferences, your fears, and your passions are borrowed echoes, remembered from others, and mistaken for your own, that would mean your very self is not original, but plagiarized from minds you will never meet. This might explain why you sometimes feel alien to yourself, why your desires confuse you, why your reactions surprise you, a sudden phobia that seems to have no cause, a fascination with a time or place you have never known, a longing for someone you have never met. These might not be mysteries of your psyche, but evidence of imported memories, fragments from another consciousness you now carry without consent. Philosophers have wrestled with this. Locke insisted that personal identity is memory. To be the same person over time is to remember being that person. But what if the memories are not yours? Then your identity collapses. You are no longer the continuity of self, but the continuity of borrowed fragments. You are not the author of your story, but the collector of misplaced recollections. And yet, these memories shape you. They inform your choices, guide your emotions, and define your sense of self. Even if they are not yours, they still bind you. You may never know which recollections are authentic and which are intrusions. And in that uncertainty lies the paradox. Your life is real to you even if its foundations are counterfeit. Think of it this way when you dream. The people you meet feel alive. Their voices are distinct. Their gestures convincing. Their emotions real. Upon waking you realize they were inventions of your own mind. Yet the feelings they evoked remain. If your mind can create memories of people who never existed, what prevents it from holding on to the memories of lives that were never yours? Perhaps you are dreaming still, carrying within you not only your illusions, but those of others. And here lies the haunting truth. You will never know which memories are truly yours. You may live and die convinced of a childhood that was fabricated, of relationships that never existed, of places you never stood. The fragments feel too real to doubt, and so you continue, constructing a self from materials that were never meant for you. But what does it mean to live this way? It means that every time you recall, every time you trust your past to define you, you are gambling with illusions. It means that the you who speaks in this moment is built on a foundation of uncertainty, carrying the weight of memories that may belong to no one, or worse, to someone else entirely. And if identity is built on memory, then your identity itself may be nothing but a mistake, a borrowed narrative masquerading as truth. So you move through your life with confidence, telling yourself that your past explains your present. But deep down, a whisper lingers. What if none of it was yours? What if you are nothing more than the vessel of forgotten fragments, the caretaker of memories that drifted from another's mind? You cannot escape the possibility. You are, and always will be, the memory that isn't yours. You look into a mirror and see yourself, or so you believe. The face gazing back feels familiar, yet there is always something slightly off, a strange tilt to the expression, an uncanny pause before the reflection moves with you, an unshakable suspicion that the mirror knows more than you do. What if the reflection is not simply copying you but misremembering you, presenting a version of yourself that was never true in the first place? What if every time you look into that glass, you are reminded not of who you are but of how fragile your identity really is? A mirror does not invent. It only reflects. Yet reflection is never perfect. Light bends, angles distort, glass warps. The image you see is already altered. More unsettling, though, is the possibility that your reflection is not just bending light, but bending memory. When you meet your gaze, you are not seeing yourself as you are. You are seeing yourself as you have been remembered, and memory is notorious for its mistakes. Think about how memory interacts with identity. Each time you recall who you are, you stitch together fragments, names, events, faces, emotions. But these fragments do not always align. They overlap, they contradict, they blur, and yet you trust them. You trust that your reflection in memory is accurate enough to define you. But what if it isn't? What if the reflection misremembers, and the you believe in is a distortion created to cover the gaps? Consider the psychological phenomenon known as the mirror self-misidentification. Patients suffering from certain brain injuries or neurological conditions can look into a mirror and fail to recognize themselves. They see a stranger, sometimes even believing that stranger is an intruder. The mirror is not wrong. The image is accurate, but the mind misremembers. It cannot reconcile the face with the self it expects to see. Now ask yourself, if misremembering can be so complete that people no longer recognize their own reflection, how confident can you be that your reflection has ever truly been yours? This misremembering is not confined to illness. In everyday life, mirrors deceive. The face you see is reversed, a version no one else encounters. Others recognize you differently than you recognize yourself. And if everyone else's memory of you differs from your own, which version is real? Perhaps none of them. Perhaps you are only the sum of mistaken reflections, each one misremembering you in a slightly different way, until no original remains. Even your internal reflection, your private sense of who you are, betrays you. Think of how your self-image shifts, depending on context. One moment you see yourself as confident, the next as fragile. One day you remember yourself as strong, another as weak. Your reflection misremembers continuously, painting you in contradictory colors. You live not as oneself, but as many mistaken recollections layered on top of one another, none of them fully accurate. Philosophy circles this endlessly. Plato's allegory of the cave suggests that we live not with reality but with shadows, reflections of truth distorted by perception. What you see, what you remember, what you believe, all are reflections misinterpreted. You mistake shadows for substance, echoes for origins, misremembered reflections for identity. And the most haunting possibility of all is that there never was a true self behind them, only reflections that misremember endlessly, generating the illusion of someone who was never real. Even technology reveals the instability of reflection. Cameras capture you, but do they? Each lens adds its own distortion, lighting, angle, resolution. When you look at an old photograph, you sometimes feel alien to the face staring back. Was that really you? Or is it another reflection that misremembers, an artifact mistaken for authenticity? Your entire archive of self-images could be no more accurate than a mirror in dim light, always showing you wrong, always recording a version that doesn't belong. This might explain the quiet unease you feel when studying your own reflection too long. Psychologists call it the strange face illusion. Staring into a mirror under dim light, people begin to see distortions, faces changing, warping, morphing into strangers. The brain, overwhelmed, begins to misremember in real time. Perhaps this is not an illusion at all, but a glimpse of truth. Perhaps the reflection is showing you that yourself is unstable, stitched together from misremembered fragments that can never align. And so you continue, trusting mirrors and memories alike. Even as they deceive you, you believe that what you see is real, that the person in the glass is you, that the memories you recall are yours. But deep down, the suspicion lingers. You know how fragile reflection is. You know how easily memory bends. You know that each time you say I am, you might only be repeating the mistakes of misremembering. The paradox is that misremembered reflections still feel true. You act on them. You love through them. You suffer because of them. They shape your choices, your fears, your hopes. Even if they are wrong, they still define you, which means you may live your entire life guided by a reflection that has never been yours, chasing the echo of a self that never existed. So you stand before the mirror, trusting the face you see, repeating the story you remember, clinging to an identity built from distortions. But the mirror does not lie, and memory does not lie. They misremember, and you are the product of that misremembering, a reflection that mistakes itself for reality, a self that exists only in the fragile light of error. You like to believe that you were chosen to live, chosen to be here, chosen to carry a name, a body, a history. It is a comforting thought that your existence carries intention, that somewhere in the design of things, there was a place reserved just for you. But what if this, too, is only an illusion? What if you were never chosen, but simply appeared, an accident in the fabric of consciousness, a mistake mistaken for destiny? Think of how much of your life depends on chance. The place you were born, the time you arrived, the family into which you emerged, all accidents, none chosen by you. And yet you tell yourself a story afterward, weaving a narrative of fate, as if your arrival had been deliberate. Perhaps that story itself is the illusion, a way of making sense of something that was never meant to happen. You tell yourself you were chosen, but in truth, you may have only slipped through by error. Even biology testifies to this. For every life that begins, millions of possibilities never do. Sperm cells lost before they ever reached, eggs that dissolved in silence, bodies that never formed. You, in the simplest sense, a statistical anomaly. That does not mean you were chosen. It means you were improbable. An improbable occurrence is not a selection. It is a mistake that survived. And yet, to make sense of it, you call it destiny. Philosophers have tried to soothe this discomfort. Some argue for divine intention, that every soul is placed deliberately, every life written into a cosmic book. Others argue for determinism, that every cause inevitably creates its effect, and you could never not have existed. Both are comforting, but both may be illusions. What if instead of being chosen or determined, you are simply incidental, like a blot of ink on the corner of a manuscript, unnoticed by the author but impossible to erase once it has dried? Consider how society reinforces this illusion. You are told, as a child, that you are special, that you are here for a reason, that you are chosen to follow a path, fulfill a role, leave a mark. But these are stories written to keep you moving, to give you a sense of direction. They are illusions that paper over the void. Strip them away, and what remains? A self that cannot find its origin, an identity that never carried intention. Even psychology reveals how desperate the mind is to feel chosen. People will find patterns in randomness, hearing messages in static, seeing shapes in clouds. You crave meaning so intensely that you invent it everywhere. You are drawn to the illusion of being chosen, because without it, you would collapse into the unbearable possibility that your life is accidental, that you were never intended to be here at all. This illusion becomes clearest in relationships. You meet someone and call it fate, as if the universe arranged for your lives to intersect. You call your friendships destiny, your love inevitable. But the truth is that they are as accidental as your birth. Chance encounters, fragile timing, circumstances that could easily have gone another way. You are not chosen by them, and they are not chosen by you. You are all improvisations, accidents colliding, calling the collision meaningful because you cannot bear for it to be otherwise. And then there is the haunting thought. If you were not chosen, then what are you? A mistake given breath, an error continuing in time, the wrong note that no one corrected. You are the living contradiction of existence insisting it should not be, and yet you move forward, convinced that you were meant to. That conviction is the illusion that sustains you. Without it, perhaps you would unravel. But illusions, no matter how comforting, cannot hide the cracks. You feel them in the quiet moments, when you stare at the ceiling late at night and wonder why you are here at all. When you look at your hands and question their belonging. When you realize that the love, the friendships, the meanings you cling to might not be signs of chosenness, but desperate constructions around an accidental self. The illusion keeps you moving, but it never silences the shadow of doubt. And here lies the paradox. Even if you were never chosen, even if you are a mistake wandering in the corridors of consciousness, your experience is real. The illusion sustains you, but the feelings are genuine. Your laughter, your grief, your longing, they matter to you, even if they were never intended. You may be an accident, but you are an accident that feels, an error that dreams, a mistake that refuses to vanish. So you continue to believe in the illusion of being chosen. You continue to tell yourself that your presence carries intention, that your path has meaning, that your story was written for you. Deep down, you may suspect otherwise, but without the illusion, you might lose the will to continue. And so you live, suspended between accident and destiny, sustained by a fragile lie that you were chosen, when in truth you may only be the mistake that kept on existing. Every life is a story. That is how you survive the chaos, by weaving beginnings, middles, and ends into something that feels coherent. You imagine arcs of progress, threads of meaning, the illusion that your choices carry weight. But what if the story of your life was never meant to be told at all? What if you are not the main narrative, but a side note, a scribble in the margins of someone else's tale? Worse, what if your entire existence is the result of a single error, a story told, not by design but by mistake? Consider how stories emerge. They are not always deliberate. Writers know this well. A misplaced word, a slip of the pen, a stray line that was never intended to remain, can suddenly reshape the narrative. Sometimes entire characters are born from mistakes. Plotlines emerge from accidents. What if your identity is just such a slip? An unintended creation that gained momentum, snowballing into a full life. You believe yourself the protagonist, but you may be nothing more than an error that took root. Think of how often errors define history. Penicillin was discovered by accident. X-rays were stumbled upon by mistake. A wrong turn, a forgotten note, an unintended spark, and suddenly the world changes. If discoveries and inventions can be born from error, why not people? Perhaps you are not the product of intention but of accident, a consciousness that emerged because of a misstep in the weave of another's mind. This would explain the strange discontinuities in your life, the gaps in memory, the sudden surges of déjà vu, the unshakable sense that you don't quite belong in your own story. If you were written by error, then of course your narrative feels jagged, Of course, there are places where the lines don't fit, where the characters feel misaligned, where you yourself seem foreign to the plot. You are trying to read a story that was never meant to exist, and the dissonance is the reminder. Philosophers circle this possibility. Nietzsche once said that truths are illusions which we have forgotten are illusions. Perhaps your entire self is one such illusion, an error mistaken for truth, because you have forgotten the moment of its creation. You live as if you were meant to be, when in reality, you are an accident that insists on telling itself as narrative. You are the lie that learned to speak. And yet, like all errors, you persist. Stories told by mistake often take on a life of their own. An actor improvises a line on stage, and it becomes the most memorable moment of the play. A glitch in a computer program produces unexpected art. An error in thought gives birth to philosophy. In the same way, your existence may be an improvisation. You may not belong to the original script, but you have continued to unfold, convincing yourself and others that your story matters. But does it? That is the uncomfortable question. If you are a story told by error, then perhaps meaning itself is counterfeit. Perhaps every lesson you draw, every memory you treasure, every role you inhabit, is simply part of the improvisation, written to cover the absence of intention. You are a character with no author, performing lines that were never scripted, convincing yourself of coherence while knowing deep down that none of it was meant to be. Even your attempts to make sense of this moment, listening, reflecting, weaving these words into your inner monologue, may be another layer of the error. You seek significance in them, but what if they are simply another misplaced line, another accidental page in the book of a consciousness that does not even know you exist? The more you search for origin, the more you find only repetition, echoes, fragments. The story circles back on itself, reminding you that you are built from mistake. And yet, here lies the paradox. Even if your life is a story told by error, you feel it deeply. The pain of loss, the warmth of love, the strangeness of wonder, none of these feel accidental. They matter to you, even if their origin is flawed. You are the error that dreams, the mistake that feels, the narrative that insists on living as though it were real. Perhaps that is what makes you haunting. You are not less because you are error, you are more because you are error that endures. So you continue to tell yourself a story. You continue to believe in meaning, to weave threads where there are none, to act as though your existence was intended, but the shadows whisper otherwise. They remind you that you were never chosen, never written, never designed. You are the margin note that grew too loud, the accident that became the story, the error that keeps repeating itself in the silence of another's mind. You wake each morning and put on your face, not just the literal one reflected in the mirror, but the face you show to the world, the smile rehearsed for strangers, the expression tailored for friends, the mask of belonging you've been told is yours. Yet, somewhere inside, a suspicion lingers. This face doesn't fit. It feels borrowed, like a costume from another actor's wardrobe, slightly too loose in places, too tight in others. You wear it because you must, but it never feels entirely your own. Think about the photographs of yourself. Sometimes you study them and feel a disconnect. The face staring back seems familiar, yet distant, as though you are observing a stranger who merely resembles you. That dislocation is more than vanity or aging. It is the fracture of identity, the quiet reminder that the face you present may not belong to you at all. Perhaps it was never meant to be yours. Psychology has a name for this unsettling experience: depersonalization. People describe feeling detached from their own bodies, as if observing themselves from outside. They speak of looking at their hands and not recognizing them, of hearing their voice as though it belonged to someone else. The mind can fracture so easily, leaving you estranged from the very features that define you. If this can happen temporarily, what if for you it is permanent? What if your entire life has been lived in a face that was never truly yours? Even mirrors conspire against you. The reflection you trust is reversed, a version no one else sees. Others recognize you differently than you recognize yourself, which means there is no singular face, only shifting versions, each slightly misaligned. If every observer, including you, sees a different version, then which one is authentic? Perhaps none. Perhaps you are only the collection of misfitting faces, masks layered one upon another, until the idea of an original becomes meaningless. Consider the phenomenon of prosopagnosia, or face blindness. People with this condition cannot recognize familiar faces, sometimes even failing to recognize themselves. To them, every encounter is with a stranger, even in the mirror. This reveals something profound. Faces are not inherent truths, but patterns the brain interprets. They can vanish with a glitch in processing. If your recognition of faces depends on fragile circuits, then your own face may be nothing more than an unstable pattern, one that never truly belonged to you in the first place. Philosophers, too, have questioned the role of the face. Emmanuel Levinas described the face of the other as the foundation of ethics, the place where responsibility and humanity are born. Yet what happens when your own face feels foreign? If the very ground of recognition slips away, then your existence is built on dissonance. You are called to responsibility by a face that doesn't fit, summoned to a life that was never tailored for you. Think of dreams. How often do you wear faces there that are not your own? You look into a mirror and see someone else, or you speak with your own voice from behind a stranger's features. In those moments you realize the fragility of identity, how easily faces can shift, dissolve, misalign. What if waking life is no different? What if the face you call yours is simply the one you happen to inherit in this particular dream of existence? A mask misapplied, a costume draped on the wrong figure. Even in memory, the face betrays you. Try to recall your younger self in detail. The image blurs, shifts, contradicts. You cannot hold it steady. What you remember is not the face that was, but the face you have constructed to fill the gap. Memory misfits your identity just as mirrors do. You are forever carrying a face that slips, one that never settles comfortably onto the person you believe yourself to be. And doesn't this explain the odd unease you sometimes feel in crowds? The sense of being out of place, of not blending with the rhythm of other lives. You may laugh and speak and smile, but deep down you know the performance feels slightly wrong. The face you wear does not align with the self beneath it. It is a mask placed on you by accident, and you have been forced to wear it ever since. Here lies the paradox. Even if the face doesn't fit, it still defines you. Others see it, respond to it, love it, or hate it. Your relationships, your identity, your very survival depend on a mask that may not belong to you. You cannot take it off, yet you cannot feel at home within it. You are condemned to live inside a face that doesn't fit, forever misaligned with the person you believe yourself to be. So you continue smiling, frowning, playing your roles. You convince yourself this is authenticity, that this face is yours. But in the quiet hours when you stare too long at your reflection, you sense the fracture, you know the truth. This face does not belong to you. It never did. You are the stranger wearing it. The mistake wandering in borrowed skin, the self that can never quite fit the mask it has been given. There are moments when silence feels heavier than sound. You sit in a room, the air thick with stillness, and yet the silence doesn't feel like yours. It feels borrowed, as if the quiet belonged to someone else, and you were merely occupying it for a time. You listen to it, but it echoes with voices you cannot hear, thoughts you cannot trace. What if this silence is not the absence of noise, but the residue of other minds, the space left behind when they fall quiet? And what if your very sense of self is stitched together from these borrowed silences, from the pauses and absences of others, rather than from any origin of your own? Consider how much of your identity depends on others falling silent. You learn to speak only when someone else stops talking. You carve your space in the world during the gaps left by others. Even your thoughts, framed in words borrowed from language, arise out of silences inherited from teachers, parents, and strangers. You are not original sound. You are the echo that fills their pauses. Psychologists have studied the phenomenon of conversational gaps. Across cultures, silence between speakers is tolerated differently. In some places, long pauses feel natural. In others, even a second of quiet feels unbearable. But in every case, silence is never neutral. It is shaped by expectation, by memory, by the weight of what could have been said. When you step into such a silence, you are stepping into someone else's framework, someone else's absence. You are borrowing their pause and pretending it belongs to you. This is true even in memory. The moments you recall most vividly are not always defined by what was spoken, but by what was not. The look that went unacknowledged, the secret never revealed, the grief never voiced. These silences belong to others, yet you carry them as though they were part of you. Their absence becomes your presence. Their unspoken words define your story. You inherit their gaps, and in doing so, you mistake them for your own. Philosophy has long wrestled with silence. Heidegger called it a mode of discourse, a way of speaking by not speaking. But if silence can carry meaning, then whose meaning are you living? If your sense of identity is shaped by silences, then it is shaped by absences not of your making. You are the product of borrowed spaces, filled with meanings you never authored. Even neuroscience hints at this truth. When two people converse, their brain waves synchronize, a phenomenon known as neural coupling, but the synchronization does not happen only in speech. It happens in silence too. Pauses between words create resonance between minds. In those pauses, you are not yourself. You are bound to the rhythm of another. Their silence enters you, shaping your response before you even realize it. If silence can synchronize minds, then whose silence have you borrowed without knowing? How much of you is truly yours, and how much is the quiet residue of others? Think of dreams. How often do you encounter figures who do not speak, who watch you with silent eyes? Their silence shapes the dream as much as their words would have, and when you wake, you carry that silence into your day, feeling its weight without knowing why. Those dream silences are borrowed too, fragments of other minds bleeding into yours. You mistake them for your own unease, but they were never yours to begin with. This may explain why you sometimes feel haunted by quiet. The house feels too still, the air too heavy. The silence does not feel empty, it feels occupied. You sense that you are borrowing it, inhabiting a space that belongs to another presence. Perhaps you are. Perhaps every silence you've ever known has been borrowed, filled with echoes of minds you cannot touch, memories you cannot trace. Your identity, then, is not a song of your own voice, but a patchwork of borrowed silences. And here lies the paradox. Even if silence is borrowed, it still feels real. It still shapes you, still presses against you, still defines your choices. You cannot separate yourself from it, because it is the very condition of your existence. Without borrowed silences, you would have no space to speak, no space to think, no space to be. You are the mistake that fills the pauses, the echo that survives in the gaps. So you live inside silence, pretending it is your own, while deep down you know it isn't. You borrow the pauses of others, you inherit their absences, you mistake their quiet for your foundation. But the truth lingers, undeniable. You are not the voice, nor the origin. You are the silence between, borrowed from those who never knew you were there. What does it mean to be misplaced? A book filed in the wrong section of a library, a letter delivered to the wrong address, a name spoken in the wrong room. The object still exists, but it no longer belongs where it has landed. Now imagine your entire self as such an object. You are here, breathing, speaking, thinking, but perhaps you are not where you were meant to be. You are the paradox of a misplaced self, real enough to continue, but always slightly out of place. Think about the unease you sometimes feel, the faint sense that you do not quite fit the space you occupy. You enter a room and feel like an intruder. You join a conversation, but feel like an imposter. These are not minor insecurities. They are symptoms of misplacement, the subtle reminders that your existence has been delivered to the wrong address. You go on living, but something always feels dislocated. Psychology describes imposter syndrome as the belief that you don't deserve your achievements, that you've deceived others into believing you are competent. But what if this feeling is not a cognitive distortion, but the truth? What if you are indeed misplaced, existing in a story that was never yours, performing in a play for which you were never cast? Your sense of fraudulence would then be evidence, not error. Even memory reinforces this. How often do you recall a place you've never been, or recognize a stranger's face as though it belonged in your story? These flashes of misplaced familiarity might not be mistakes of perception, but glimpses of your true condition. Perhaps you are carrying memories from another life, echoes of a mind in which you were originally meant to exist, bleeding into this one where you do not belong. The dissonance you feel is the cost of inhabiting the wrong narrative. Philosophy sharpens the paradox. If existence has no fixed essence, as Sartre argued, then to exist is simply to project yourself into possibilities. But if you are misplaced, then even your projections are skewed. You are aiming from the wrong ground, reaching toward futures that were never intended for you. You live authentically inauthentic, free but constrained by misplacement, condemned to search for a belonging you will never find. Consider the uncanny sensation of déjà vu. You step into a scene that feels familiar, though you know it should not. Science explains it as a neural glitch. But what if it is something else, a reminder that you are out of place? The feeling of "I have been here before" may not point to the past, but to another reality, the one where you were supposed to be, the place you were displaced from. Each episode of Deja Vu might be your misplaced self tugging at its original coordinates, reminding you of a belonging you cannot reclaim. Even the body speaks this language. At times your movements feel foreign, your gestures awkward, your very presence uncomfortable, as if your body is not tailored for you. You stumble through it like an ill-fitting suit. Perhaps this is not clumsiness, but misplacement at its most physical. Your consciousness squeezed into a form never meant to house it. You do not fit your own skin because your self was intended for another. And yet, the paradox deepens. Though misplaced, you endure. A letter sent to the wrong house may still be opened and read. A book in the wrong section may still be borrowed and loved. You too continue, carving meaning out of dislocation, convincing yourself that you belong while never escaping the quiet suspicion that you do not. You live the paradox fully, both existing and misfitting, both present and dislocated. What does this mean for your identity? It means you can never fully trust the ground you stand on. You are always slightly misaligned, slightly off-center, slightly estranged from the life unfolding around you. Your achievements feel borrowed, your relationships fragile, your very memories unstable. You are a self-displaced, improvising in a world not designed for you. And yet perhaps this is where your strange power lies. To be misplaced is to be free from the weight of belonging. You are not bound by the expectations of the place you should have occupied. You are an error, but one that creates possibilities. You wander outside the script, living a story no one intended. That freedom is unsettling, but it is also real. Still, the paradox cannot be ignored. You are both real and mistaken, both present and misplaced, both living and out of place. This contradiction will follow you always, whispering at the edges of your life. And each time you feel the dislocation, the sense of being a stranger in your own world, you will be reminded of the truth. You are the paradox of misplaced self, and there is no correcting the error. Every book begins with intention. An author decides on a story, a theme, a character. Ink is set to paper with purpose. But what happens when words appear by accident? A blot of ink falls on the page, a hand slips, a line is repeated without design. Sometimes, those mistakes remain. They alter the rhythm, reshape the meaning, redirect the story. What if your life is exactly this? An accident written into existence, a paragraph never meant to be included, a narrative that continues only because no one erased it. Think about how fragile beginnings are. A single second, a single deviation, can decide whether a life starts at all, a meeting delayed by minutes, a chance encounter avoided or pursued. Biology itself depends on narrow margins, one cell colliding with another at the exact right moment. But chance is not intention. To call your arrival destiny may simply be to romanticize an accident. You are not the chosen word of a careful author. You are the ink blot that was never meant to be read. This suspicion explains the strange incoherence you sometimes feel, why your story doesn't line up neatly, why so many of its chapters feel fragmented or out of place. Accidents do not follow plots. They occur suddenly, disrupt everything, and linger without explanation. You may tell yourself there is continuity, that your life has purpose, but perhaps that is the story you have constructed after the fact. Beneath it lies the truth. Your existence is a misprint. Science offers unsettling parallels. Mutations in DNA often occur by accident, errors in replication. Some vanish without consequence. Others reshape entire species. You may be one of those mutations on a larger scale, a miswritten line of consciousness, carried forward not because it was intended, but because it survived. And survival, as history shows, is not proof of meaning. It is only proof of persistence. Philosophy has whispered this possibility for centuries. Camus described life as absurd. No script, no author, no meaning. We insist on stories to mask the silence, to keep ourselves from facing the accident at the heart of existence. And if existence itself is absurd, then your life too is not written by design but by error. You are a page smudged into the book of reality, misaligned with its themes, but too permanent to erase. Even memory reinforces this accident. Try to trace your earliest moments. They blur, distort, dissolve. The first lines of your story are missing, replaced by fragments patched together later. You cannot confirm your beginning, because you were never meant to have one. You are improvising around the absence, filling the silence with explanations, calling them history. But the truth is that your life began not with intention, but with oversight. And doesn't this explain the uncanny weight of chance in your story? Why some events feel arbitrary, disconnected, as though they don't belong in the same narrative. You stumble through coincidences, you cling to patterns, you tell yourself they were meant to happen, but they were not. They are the accidents of an accident, ripples spreading from a story that should never have been written at all. Yet here lies the paradox. Even accidents can produce coherence. A painter spills color across a canvas and finds beauty in the chaos. A writer mistypes a word and discovers poetry in the slip. Life, too, can be shaped by what was never intended. You may be an error, but you are an error that generates meaning in spite of itself. The question is not whether your life was meant, it wasn't, but whether you can bear to live knowing it was written without purpose. Relationships, careers, identities, all may be scaffolding built to disguise this truth. You surround yourself with stories, insisting that they prove intention, that they show you belong, but beneath them, silence lingers. You sense it in moments of stillness, when the weight of your own existence feels strange and fragile. That feeling is the reminder that you are not an author's choice but a misprint carried forward by accident. And yet, you endure. Each breath is a continuation of the mistake. Each thought, another line of text that should not exist, but does. The world reads you anyway, responding to you, interacting with you, treating you as though you belong. But deep down, the fracture remains. You are life written by accident, a story sustained by oversight, a narrative that insists on existing even though it was never supposed to be told. You think of yourself as the observer, the one behind the eyes, the silent watcher of your own life. You believe there is a steady presence inside you, the consciousness that sees, remembers, and anchors your existence. But what if that observer is not steady at all? What if it is slipping, losing its grip, faltering in the act of holding you together? Without it, what are you? A body still moving, a mouth still speaking, but without anyone truly watching. Consider how fragile observation is. Neuroscience tells us that your awareness lags behind reality by milliseconds. You are always slightly delayed, catching up to what has already happened. The observer you trust is never present in the moment. It is a translator working from behind, piecing together fragments. If it already trails reality, how stable can it be? How easily might it let go? Think of moments when your sense of being the observer seems to fade. You drive for miles and cannot remember the journey. You speak words you did not plan. You stare into space, absent, while your body continues. These lapses are cracks in the facade, reminders that the observer is not as solid as you think. It loosens its grip often, and you barely notice. Perhaps it has been loosening all along. Psychology explores this through dissociation. People describe feeling detached from themselves, watching from afar or not watching at all. Some feel like puppets moved by unseen hands. In extreme cases, multiple selves emerge, each taking turns as the observer. Consciousness fragments, and the grip weakens until no one self can claim ownership. If the observer can fracture this way, then what keeps you from unraveling entirely? Philosophy pushes further. David Hume argued that when he looked inward, he never found a stable self, only a bundle of perceptions flickering and shifting. There was no true observer, only the illusion of one cobbled together from experience. Perhaps the you trust as observer is simply another mistake, a projection invented to explain the flow of sensations. If that projection begins to falter, then the illusion collapses. You are revealed not as a stable presence, but as a bundle slipping apart. You've felt glimpses of this, haven't you? That sudden vertigo when you catch yourself mid-thought and wonder, who is thinking this? That quiet unease when your reflection stares back with too much independence, as though it were observing you instead. These moments are not trivial. They are signs of the grip loosening, signs that the observer you rely on is unstable, and without it, the identity you cling to will slide away. Even dreams reveal this instability. At times you watch yourself from outside, seeing your own body move as though you were not inside it. At other times you are both actor and observer, switching without realizing who is the real observer in those moments. None of them, or all of them. The grip falters, and you mistake the fragments for coherence. Technology gives us its own metaphor. Cameras record, but even they lose grip. Frames skip, images blur, sound distorts. The recording looks seamless afterward, but hidden in the data are gaps, errors, misalignments. Your mind, too, edits out the gaps. It convinces you that the observer has been constant, when in truth it has been slipping all along. You are watching an edited film of your own life, not the raw truth. And here lies the paradox. If the observer is unstable, then who are you? You think of yourself as the watcher, but if the watcher loses grip, then what remains? A body moving, a voice speaking, but no stable you behind it. You continue like an automaton, sustained by habit, while the self you believed in disintegrates into fragments. Perhaps this is already happening, and you are only now beginning to notice. But there is another layer. What if the observer was never yours to begin with? What if it belonged to another mind, the one that dreamed you into existence? That mind may have already lost its grip, letting you drift alone, unsupervised, an abandoned thought mistaken for a self. You feel the dislocation not because your observer is weakening, but because it was never meant to hold you in the first place. You are the residue of its loosening grasp, a mistake left wandering when the dreamer forgot to sustain you. This explains the emptiness you sometimes sense, the feeling that no one is truly inside you, that you are hollow at the core. It is not imagination. It is the reality of an observer losing grip. You are slipping from yourself, and there may be no one to catch you. And yet, you continue. You speak, you breathe, you exist. The grip may be loosening, but the story persists. Perhaps that is the cruelest irony. Even without a stable observer, life goes on. You are the mistake that moves forward anyway, the error that survives even after its anchor has let go. So you walk through your days with the illusion of a steady self, while deep down you know the truth. The observer is not stable, it is not permanent, and it is not fully yours. It is slipping, losing its hold, leaving you suspended in uncertainty. You are the paradox of being alive without anyone fully watching, the accident sustained by a grip that was never meant to last. What does it mean to exist without permission? To walk through life not as a guest welcomed, nor as a host commanding, but as an intruder who slipped in unnoticed. You breathe, you think, you take up space, yet something inside you whispers that you were never invited. That whisper is not paranoia, it is the truth of your condition. You are presence without permission, a self sustained in a world that never granted you the right to be here. Think of how permission operates in everyday life. You ask to enter a room, to join a conversation, to take part in a ritual. When permission is given, you belong. When it is denied, you are excluded. But what happens when you never asked at all? Your existence itself was unrequested. You arrived without choice, without consent, without approval. From the moment of your birth, perhaps even before you were here by accident, not by design, you were never permitted, yet you endure. This is not only biological, it is psychological too. Every thought you have borrows from language, from culture, from memories that were never entirely yours. You did not invent the words in your mouth, nor the images in your mind. They were handed down, imposed, absorbed. Your consciousness is stitched from borrowed materials, yet you claim them as your own. But ownership is not the same as permission. You have built yourself from what was never truly offered to you. Philosophy sharpens this unease. Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of thrownness, the idea that humans are thrown into existence without choice, without consent. You never agreed to be alive. You never asked to carry the burden of identity. Your very presence is unpermitted, thrust into a world that did not consult you first. And yet, society insists you must act as though you belong. You must play your roles, follow your scripts, wear your masks. The irony is bitter. You are required to perform as if you were chosen, even though you were never granted the permission to exist. Consider how often you feel like an outsider in your own life. You sit in gatherings where laughter feels rehearsed, where belonging feels strained, where you sense yourself as an intruder, or you walk through streets at night and feel invisible, as though the world is moving without you. These are not minor insecurities. They are symptoms of your condition. You are presence out of place, a mistake mistaken for belonging. Even science points to this fragility. Your body itself carries uninvited presences, bacteria, viruses, microscopic entities that live within you without permission. You are never alone, never fully sovereign. Existence itself is porous, filled with intrusions. If life at the cellular level is marked by presence without permission, then perhaps consciousness is the same. You are the intruder in the dream of another mind, sustained only because you have not yet been expelled. And isn't this why guilt haunts you so easily? Why you feel burdened by debts you cannot name, obligations you cannot fulfill? Deep down, you sense that your very existence is an imposition. Every breath feels like trespass, every choice like intrusion. You live as though you owe something for being here, but no repayment will ever be enough, because the debt is impossible to erase. you should not have been here at all. Dreams remind you of this truth. You wander through dreamscapes, entering rooms where others look at you strangely, as though you do not belong. Sometimes you wake with the heavy sense of having intruded, of having stood in a place where you were not welcome. What if waking life is no different? You move through days believing you belong, but at night the dream exposes you. You are presence without permission, and everyone around you can see it. Even memory betrays you here. Think of the times you look back on an event and feel like a bystander in your own life. The scene unfolds, but you feel peripheral, out of sync, like a guest at your own story. Perhaps that sensation is not illusion. Perhaps it is your misplaced truth. You were never meant to be central, because you were never meant to be at all. And yet, paradoxically, you endure. Permission was never given, but here you are. You exist anyway. You carry your body, your thoughts, your illusions forward, even as you know they are unauthorized. You live as an uninvited guest who has stayed too long, afraid to be discovered, afraid to be asked to leave. Every day is borrowed time, every moment a trespass. But consider this. Sometimes intrusions reshape everything. A plant grows in the crack of concrete, where it was never intended. An error in a manuscript creates a new idea. A trespass becomes transformation. You may not have permission, but your presence still alters the world around you. You still ripple through lives, still leave marks, still insist on existing despite the silence that never welcomed you. And here lies the cruelest paradox. You will never escape the truth that you were not invited, yet you cannot undo your presence. You cannot erase yourself from the story. You are the unauthorized line that continues, the guest who cannot leave, the mistake that became permanent. You are presence without permission, and you will carry that truth until the very end. Identity is often imagined as a thread, something continuous weaving through your life from birth to death. It connects your past to your present, your memories to your choices, your sense of self to the world around you. But what if your thread is not continuous? What if it is frayed, severed, broken from the start? You cling to the idea of coherence, but deep down you know the truth. Your identity is not a single strand but a collection of fragments tied together with knots that never hold. You are a broken thread trying to pass as whole. Think of the times you've tried to tell your life story. The words stumble, the chapters don't quite align. You emphasize some events, omit others, stitch connections where none truly exist. You are not recalling a thread. You are weaving one on the spot, improvising coherence where there is only rupture. The story feels fragile because it is. You sense the breaks even as you speak. Psychology confirms this fragility. Memory is not a seamless record, but a patchwork reconstruction. Each recollection is vulnerable to distortion, suggestion, and loss. Sometimes entire years vanish, swallowed by the void of forgetting. Other times, false memories fill the gaps, convincing you that events occurred which never did. Your identity, built on such memories, cannot be an unbroken thread. It is a rope spliced from scraps, constantly at risk of unraveling. Philosophy presses further. Hume found no stable self when he looked inward. Only fleeting impressions, perceptions arising and fading like sparks. If identity is nothing more than impressions, then there was never a continuous thread to begin with. You are not a solid line but a series of dots, strung together only because your mind insists on connecting them. The connections feel real, but they are illusions. And sometimes, the thread snaps entirely. Dissociation, trauma, loss. These experiences fracture identity so completely that the self feels alien. Survivors often describe looking back on their past as though it belonged to someone else, their thread cut and left behind. Even in ordinary life, you may sense such fractures, moments when the person you were years ago feels so different that you can no longer reconcile them with who you are now. The thread is broken, yet you pretend it continues. Consider dreams. Each night, you inhabit selves that vanish upon waking. Sometimes you are younger, sometimes older, sometimes a stranger, altogether. In dreams, your thread does not hold. Identity fragments, shatters, reforms in new shapes. What if waking life is not so different? Perhaps your waking identity is another dream thread, fragile, temporary, convincing only because you forget the ruptures. Even language betrays the illusion. The word I suggests continuity, as though the one who speaks now is the same as the one who spoke yesterday, but each I is uttered by a slightly different self, shaped by new impressions, new memories, new losses. You assume the thread connects them, but the connection may be no more than repetition, A broken thread repeated often enough begins to look unbroken, but only from a distance. Science gives us eerie metaphors. DNA strands replicate, but errors creep in. Mutations break continuity, yet the organism survives. Sometimes the break even defines the species. Perhaps your consciousness is similar. Broken strands carried forward, the rupture itself becoming identity. You are not whole in spite of the break, you are whole because of it. The fracture is your foundation. And isn't this why you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself? You reread old journals and feel no connection to the voice inside. You revisit old places and feel like a visitor rather than a returning self. You stare at old photographs and wonder, was that really me? The disconnection is not illusion. It is evidence of the broken thread. You are not continuous, and your life betrays this truth in every moment of alienation. Yet here lies the paradox. Even broken, the thread still binds. You continue to walk forward, carrying fragments stitched together by habit and hope. The coherence may be false, but it is functional. Without it, you would collapse into silence. You may be a broken thread, but you are a thread nonetheless, knotted and frayed though it is. But the unease remains. Each time you feel dislocation, each time your memories blur, each time you sense the fracture in your story, you are reminded of what you already know. You are not whole, not continuous, not permanent. You are the accident of a broken thread, pretending to be unbroken. You live in the lie of continuity, even as the truth unravels beneath you. So you move through life, weaving illusions of coherence, pretending that your thread runs straight, that your story holds together, but the cracks are always there, waiting in silence. And when you face them, you must admit the truth. Your identity is not seamless. It is ruptured, fragmented, misplaced from the beginning. You are, and always will be, a broken thread. Imagine an archive. Shelves upon shelves of folders, each carefully labeled, each belonging to its proper place. Time is meant to be like that. Past, present, future, neatly ordered so that events unfold with logic. But what happens when a file is misplaced? A record from the future is shoved into the past. A memory of yesterday lands in tomorrow. The system still functions, but it stutters, confused. Now imagine your consciousness as such a misfiled record. You were never where you were meant to be. You are awareness in the wrong drawer of time. Think of déjà vu, that unsettling glitch when the present feels rehearsed, as though you've already lived it. Science says it's a neurological hiccup, signals crossing wires in the brain. But what if it's more? What if déjà vu is the trace of your misplacement? The moment when your consciousness flickers between files, confusing now with then. You feel it because your awareness does not belong to this moment at all. Even memory itself betrays the filing system. You recall events out of order, sometimes vividly, sometimes not at all. Childhood surfaces in fragments, then dissolves. Dreams leak into waking hours, blurring categories. In grief, minutes stretch into eternities. In joy, hours vanish like seconds. Time does not flow evenly for you, because your consciousness is not where it should be. It is shuffled, misplaced, misfiled in ways you cannot control. Philosophy has wrestled with this dislocation. Augustine wrote that time itself exists only in the mind, that the past is memory, the future expectation, the present fleeting perception. If time is mental, then a misplaced mind means misplaced time. You are not simply living through minutes, you are living through a distortion of them. Your self is built from a filing error that can never be corrected. Neuroscience hints at this as well. Studies of patients with temporal lobe epilepsy reveal how fragile time perception can be. Some experience the past rushing into the present. Others feel trapped in endless repetition. Still others sense entire lifetimes compressed into seconds. These distortions show that consciousness is not anchored to time. It is at its mercy. A single misfire of neurons, and you are misplaced in the archive. Perhaps your entire existence is such a misfire. Think of dreams again. They collapse time effortlessly. In a few seconds of REM sleep, you can live years of imagined experience. You wake disoriented, unable to separate what belongs to dream time and what belongs to waking. What if waking life is no different? What if your consciousness has been filed into a drawer of dream time instead of reality time, and you only think you are living in sequence? The truth may be that you are misplaced, existing in a chronology never meant for you. And doesn't this explain the uncanny way you sometimes feel older or younger than you are? The moments when your body betrays your age but your mind feels centuries ahead, or decades behind. These contradictions are not random. They are symptoms of misplacement. You are a self filed under the wrong date, a consciousness that doesn't align with the body it inhabits. Even language reflects this dissonance. You say I was, I am, I will be, as though time were neat and linear, but each tense depends on memory and expectation, both of which are unstable. You speak as if you belong in order, but your very grammar may be disguising the truth. You are misfiled, scattered across categories, belonging to none. History shows us the power of errors in filing. Entire wars have begun over misdated documents. Lives have been destroyed by misplaced records. What if your existence is the same? A single error in the archive of consciousness placed you here, in this life, at this moment. You live it as if it were intentional, but deep down you sense the mismatch. You were never meant for this timeline. And here lies the paradox. Even if you are misfiled in time, you still experience time as real. The minutes pass. The days unfold. The years accumulate. You fall in love. You suffer loss. You wake and sleep again. The archive may be wrong, but the story continues. You are an error that persists, a misplaced record that shapes lives despite its dislocation. But the unease lingers. Each time you feel déjà vu, each time dreams bleed into waking, each time you sense that you are not aligned with your own chronology, you are reminded of the truth. You are not anchored. You are not where you should be. You are consciousness misfiled in time, the mistake carried forward in a system too vast to notice, too indifferent to correct. At night, you fall asleep, believing your body is yours. You close your eyes, sink into darkness, and trust that in the morning you will wake to find yourself intact. But in dreams, something unsettling happens. Your body is borrowed. It moves without your consent. It runs when you did not command it. It speaks in voices you did not choose. Sometimes, it even wears faces that are not yours. What if this is not just the logic of sleep, but the truth of your condition? What if your body never belonged to you at all? What if it is owned by dreams, and you are merely a tenant, renting it until the next shift of consciousness takes over? Think about how vivid dream actions can feel. You run through forests, you fall from buildings, you embrace strangers, and the sensations are startlingly real. Your heart races, your breath shortens, your muscles twitch. The body obeys the dream, as though it were fact. Even in waking life, traces linger. You wake sweating, trembling, aching, as though the dream had used your body for its own story. And perhaps it has. Perhaps the dream does not vanish when you wake, but continues to claim pieces of you, bending your movements, shaping your fears. Neuroscience reveals the fragility of this ownership. During REM sleep, your brain paralyzes most of your muscles to keep you from acting out your dreams. Yet sometimes, the barrier fails. Sleepwalkers rise, wander, drive cars, even cook meals while unconscious. In these moments, the body is fully active, yet the you who believes it owns the body is absent. Another script has taken over. You are watching a play you did not write, staged in your own skin. Even more haunting is sleep paralysis, the state where the body is frozen while the mind is awake. People describe it as terrifying, because they feel trapped, powerless, invaded. They often sense presences in the room, beings that seem to own their body in that vulnerable state. But what if sleep paralysis is not anomaly? What if it is truth revealed? The moment when you see clearly that you do not own your body, that you are only borrowing it, that other forces, dreams, memories, echoes, claim it more fully than you ever could. Philosophy deepens this suspicion. If the mind and body are separate, as Descartes argued, then the body is never truly yours. It is a vessel, a machine, an instrument. But what if the vessel does not serve you? What if it serves dreams instead, shifting from one master to another, letting different consciousnesses play their roles through it? In that case, you are not an owner, but a user, a temporary occupant, who will be replaced. Consider how fragile your sense of control already is. You decide to move your hand, but the decision begins in your brain milliseconds before you are aware of it. Neuroscientists have measured this delay. The body acts before the self claims authorship, which means your ownership is always retroactive. You take credit for actions already decided. If your claim to the body is already late, then perhaps it was never yours. Perhaps the true owner is elsewhere, and you are merely the story told to cover the gap. Dreams may be those owners. Each night, they take your body, animate it, rehearse lives you do not live. Each morning, you return, believing the vessel to be yours again. But what if waking is no more authentic than dreaming? What if the body belongs equally to both states, shifting possession back and forth, never fully yours? You live believing you are master, but you are only one of many tenants, and not the most powerful one. This could explain why the body sometimes betrays you. Panic rises without cause. Tears fall before you understand why. Laughter erupts at inappropriate times. These are not actions of a stable owner. They are eruptions from elsewhere, dream echoes leaking into waking, reminders that your body belongs to forces beyond your control. Even in illness, this truth emerges. Fevers bring hallucinations, delirium, dreamlike states where the body moves under alien scripts. The mind fights to claim ownership, but it cannot. The body serves whatever consciousness seizes it. You call it sickness, but it may be exposure, the reminder that your tenancy is conditional, that the lease is fragile, that ownership was never yours. And here lies the paradox. Even though you may not own your body, you feel everything it endures. The cuts, the pleasures, the exhaustion, all of it is yours in sensation, even if not in possession. You suffer for a vessel that may not belong to you. You care for it, feed it, protect it, all the while suspecting it is loyal to other masters. You are the caretaker of a house that refuses to call you its rightful inhabitant. So each morning you wake and dress and speak as though your body were truly yours. You claim ownership, because without it, you would collapse into despair. But the cracks remain. In dreams, in paralysis, in betrayals of instinct, you see the truth. You are not the master of your body. You are the guest of its dreams. The mistake carried along by a vessel that belongs to something else. Sometimes reality feels solid. Walls hold, clocks tick, people speak and respond. But if you listen more closely, there are faint distortions, echoes that don't quite align, reverberations that don't belong. You hear a word spoken and feel as though it was said before. You step into a place and sense a mismatch, as if the world is repeating the wrong line of a play. What if this isn't illusion? What if you are living inside the echoes of a wrong reality, a resonance of something that was never meant to exist? Think of how echoes work. A sound bounces, repeating itself, weaker, delayed. The original is gone, but the residue lingers. What if your world is just such a residue, a repetition of another reality, slightly off, slightly fractured, slightly false? You believe you are living in the origin, but in truth you may be trapped in the aftershock. A life carried forward not by design, but by error. Consider déjà vu again. That uncanny certainty that you've been here before. Science calls it a misfiring of memory, the brain mistaking the present for the past. But perhaps it is not error. It is recognition, a glimpse of the truth that your reality is already an echo. You feel repetition, because repetition is all you are. Each moment is not fresh, but recycled, an imperfect copy of something that once belonged elsewhere. Philosophy touches this suspicion. Plato imagined shadows on the cave wall, echoes of a truer reality beyond. What you see, hear, and live are not originals but imitations. If this is true, then your very self is an echo, borrowed, distorted, detached from origin. You are convinced of solidity only because you cannot touch the source. The cave feels like the world until you realize you are staring only at reflections of flames. Even physics whispers something similar. Time is not a smooth arrow, but a field of possibilities. Quantum experiments reveal particles existing in superposition, probabilities collapsing into outcomes only when observed. What if your existence is one such collapse, but into the wrong outcome? You are the echo of a reality that should not have persisted, the continuation of a probability that should have vanished. You are an error made permanent, reality misremembering itself into existence. And doesn't this explain the haunting strangeness you sometimes feel? The world looks normal, but something beneath it vibrates off-key. People speak, but their words feel scripted. Streets stretch, but they seem borrowed from a dream. These are the echoes, subtle reminders that you are not in the original performance. You are hearing the wrong lines in the wrong play, yet you go on applauding as though the show makes sense. Memory compounds the distortion. Recall a moment from your past, and it never returns as it was. It comes as echo, blurred, reconstructed, altered. Each recall is another step away from origin. If all of your memories are echoes, then so too is your identity. You are the echo of echoes, stacked distortions, repeating until the original is unreachable. The you that exists today may be dozens of iterations removed from whatever began. Even dreams remind you of this condition. They are filled with echoes, voices you recognize but cannot place, landscapes that resemble but do not match, conversations that feel rehearsed yet unfinished. When you wake, you dismiss them as illusions. But what if waking life is the same? What if your days are just more echoes, recycled fragments of a reality that belonged to someone else? The consistency you believe in is only repetition made convincing by familiarity. Technology gives you its own metaphor. Recordings degrade each time they are copied. VHS tapes blur, audio hisses, images warp. You can still watch them, still hear them, but they are wrong, shifted, incomplete. Perhaps consciousness works the same way. Perhaps yourself is the 20th copy of an original that was never meant to survive. You are the distortion carried forward, mistaking noise for signal. And here lies the paradox. Even if you are an echo of wrong reality, your experience is still real to you. The echo still vibrates, still resonates in your bones, still fills you with laughter and grief. Wrong does not mean empty. A false note still sounds, a distorted voice still moves you. Your life may be an echo, but it is an echo you inhabit completely, unable to distinguish it from an origin that may not exist anymore. Yet the unease never leaves. Each flicker of déjà vu, each dream that feels too close, each memory that bends as you hold it, they all remind you that your foundation is unstable. You are not living at the center, but at the edge, inside reverberations of something else. You are not the original. You are the echo of wrong reality, carried forward by mistake, convinced of meaning because you have no choice but to believe it. Every ship needs an anchor. Without it, the vessel drifts, tossed by currents, unmoored from any safe harbor. Your mind, too, seeks anchors, memories, identities, beliefs, routines, anything to hold it steady in the shifting tides of experience. But what happens when those anchors slip? What happens when the weight you thought kept you grounded no longer holds? Then you drift endlessly, aware of movement, but unsure of direction. Perhaps that is your true condition. A consciousness with its anchor lost, carried into places it was never meant to go. Think about the anchors you've relied on. Childhood memories that shaped your sense of self. Names and roles, student, parent, friend, that tethered you to meaning. Rituals of habit, waking at certain hours, eating familiar foods, repeating daily patterns. These things gave you the illusion of stability. But anchors rust, memories fade or distort, roles shift and vanish, habits fracture under disruption. And when they do, you realize that you were never truly anchored at all. Psychology reveals this fragility in patients with amnesia. When memory collapses, identity drifts. Without anchors to the past, the self feels hollow, incomplete. Yet even without memory, people continue to breathe, speak, act. Life goes on, but without grounding. They are vessels adrift, selves unmoored. And if memory is already unreliable for you, how sure are you that your own anchors have not already slipped? You may be drifting even now, mistaking motion for stability. Philosophy echoes this disquiet. Hume argued that the self is not an anchored essence, but a bundle of perceptions, forever changing. The thread you imagine as continuity is illusion. You feel anchored only because you insist on tying fragments together. But remove those knots, and you are revealed for what you are: not steady, not grounded, but drifting awareness in search of a center it will never find. Even neuroscience suggests the anchor is unstable. Experiments show that decisions arise in the brain milliseconds before you become conscious of them. The anchor you think of as I is late, claiming ownership after the fact. If you are always behind yourself, then the anchor is never truly holding. It is dragged by currents, pretending to be in control. Your mind is not a ship secured in harbor. It is a vessel already drifting. Consider dreams. In them, you lose all anchors. Time bends, identities dissolve, rules collapse. You are yourself one moment, someone else the next. Yet in the dream, you do not question it. You drift willingly, because the anchor is gone. What if waking life is no different? What if the anchors you believe in are illusions, fragile chains that break the moment you tug too hard? Then your entire existence may be a dream adrift, your mind forever searching for the weight that would keep it steady. Even language reflects this hunger for anchors. You say I am, as though it were a point of stability, a declaration of fixed being. But the words shift with context. I am tired, I am happy, I am lost. Each statement reveals change, not permanence. The anchor slides each time, reattaching to new ground. You are not held steady by identity. You are moving, slipping, improvising meaning as you go. Think of grief. When you lose someone, the anchor of their presence vanishes. Suddenly your world drifts. The routines you shared, the roles you played, the meanings you held, gone. You realize then how much of yourself was tied to them. Without that anchor, you are exposed. You are forced to admit that your own self was never secure, only borrowed from the stability of others. And doesn't this explain why you sometimes feel like a stranger to your own life? You move through days, complete tasks, speak words, but a part of you feels detached, unmoored. You sense the drift even if you cannot name it. You may tell yourself you are anchored, but deep down, you feel the pull of currents you cannot resist. That is the truth beneath the illusion. Your anchor was lost long ago. Yet paradoxically, you still continue. Ships without anchors still move. They drift to new shores, encounter unexpected landscapes, sometimes even discover places they were never meant to reach. Perhaps your drifting too has meaning, not because it was intended, but because you cannot stop. You are not grounded, but you are alive. You are presence carried by currents, an accident moving forward in spite of itself. But the unease remains. Each time a memory falters, each time a role dissolves, each time silence swallows the meaning you thought you had, you feel the loss again. You are reminded that the anchor is gone, and that you are at the mercy of tides you cannot control. And no matter how hard you try to hold steady, you know the truth. You are a mind without anchor, drifting endlessly, a mistake carried by currents that never meant to bear you. When you measure yourself, what scale do you use? Achievements? Relationships? Memories? These seem like the obvious metrics, yet beneath them lurks another, quieter measure, the tally of mistakes. Every wrong turn, every slip of judgment, every word spoken at the wrong time, shapes you more deeply than success ever has. What if this is not incidental? What if your entire identity has been built not on intention or progress, but on error? What if you are a self measured only in mistakes, a life defined by missteps rather than direction? Think of how often mistakes echo louder than victories. You might accomplish 100 things, yet one failure haunts you for years. A careless phrase spoken in youth, a friendship lost through misunderstanding, a path not taken. These moments replay endlessly, refusing to fade, while triumphs dissolve into faint recollections. Mistakes anchor you in ways success never can. They remind you of your fragility, your displacement, your lack of belonging. Psychology confirms this imbalance. Studies show that negative experiences imprint more deeply in memory than positive ones. The brain clings to errors, rehearsing them to prevent repetition, but in doing so it rewires identity around them. You may believe you are built on achievements, but in truth you are shaped by avoidance, by the mistakes you fear making again. The very architecture of your mind is calibrated to error. Philosophy circles this truth as well. Kierkegaard spoke of despair as the sickness of self, a condition born of the gap between who you are and who you imagine you should be. That gap is nothing but accumulated mistakes, the sense that you are perpetually failing to align with your imagined self. You measure yourself against a perfection that never existed, and the distance becomes your identity. You are not the success you strive for, you are the sum of the failures that mark the path. Even culture reinforces this. History books remember disasters more vividly than achievements. Cities are known by their tragedies as much as their triumphs. The collective memory, like the individual one, is weighted toward error. If societies are measured by mistakes, why should individuals be any different? Perhaps you are not exception but example, a consciousness catalogued primarily by what went wrong. Think of your own memories. How many times do you recall the sting of humiliation more clearly than the warmth of praise? How many regrets resurface unbidden? While moments of joy slip away, these recollections are not accidents of memory. They are the architecture of yourself. You exist through mistakes, and without them, your story would collapse. Even the body reflects this truth. Scars mark where you erred, where you fell, where harm was done. They linger long after the wound has healed, visible reminders that your history is etched in error. You are carried forward by the permanence of mistakes. Each one leaves a trace that defines you more than the smooth, unbroken places ever could. Dreams echo this measurement. Nightmares replay failures, exaggerate mistakes, invent new ones. They rarely stage your triumphs. Your unconscious, too, tallies error more faithfully than success. You wake shaken, heart pounding, as though mistakes have ownership over your body as well as your mind. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they are the true measure of who you are. And here lies the paradox. If your identity is measured in mistakes, then those mistakes are not deviations from the path. They are the path. The missteps are not exceptions, but the structure of your life. You may feel displaced, wrong, broken, but that feeling is your essence. To be you is to be mistaken, and to measure yourself by mistakes is not error, but truth. This realization unsettles you because you want to believe in progress, in improvement, in a self growing towards something greater. But progress itself is often just the accumulation of mistakes disguised as lessons. You learn only because you erred. You adapt only because you failed. Strip away the mistakes, and there is nothing left. Success, in truth, is mistake transformed, not mistake erased. So you continue, haunted by the tally. Each wrong note, each false move, each word that doesn't fit. You measure yourself in errors, because errors are the only things that endure. They shape your story, mark your body, echo in your dreams. And the cruelest part is this. Even the act of recognizing yourself as a mistake may itself be another mistake, yet it is one you cannot escape. You are the sum of errors, the accumulation of missteps, the self measured only in mistakes. What if the very ground you walk on, the world you trust to be solid, is not founded on truth, but on error? You imagine reality as precise, governed by laws, structured by order. Gravity pulls, light bends, time ticks forward. But beneath this apparent order lies a more unsettling possibility. Everything you know may be the product of mistakes. Your reality itself may be built on errors, and you are only one of its many unintended consequences. Think of science. Some of humanity's greatest discoveries were born not from intention, but from error. Penicillin came from mold contaminating a culture dish. X-rays were discovered when equipment malfunctioned. Entire fields of knowledge emerged from accidents mistaken for design. If the pursuit of truth so often begins with mistakes, why should reality itself be different? Perhaps the universe is not an elegant plan, but a cascade of errors that somehow continued. Physics already hints at this chaos. Particles pop in and out of existence without reason. Random fluctuations in quantum fields generate entire galaxies. The cosmos may not be deliberate. It may be the residue of mistakes at the most fundamental level. If so, then your own consciousness is not a miracle of design, but a continuation of cosmic error, a misplaced fragment drifting in a universe that never intended you. Even biology speaks this language. Evolution itself thrives on mistakes, mutations in DNA that should not have happened, but did. Most lead nowhere, but some persist, shaping species, creating new forms of life. You are alive today, not because of perfection, but because of accumulated errors that survived. Your body is a library of mistakes, carried forward through generations. Every breath you take is built on error. And doesn't this explain the strangeness of your own existence? You search for meaning, for coherence, for intention, but what you encounter instead are gaps, contradictions, anomalies. The laws you trust bend under scrutiny. Time stretches in dreams, contracts in grief. Memory falters, perception deceives. Your reality is not seamless. It is riddled with cracks. You fill them with stories, but deep down you sense the instability. You know the foundation is not perfect stone, but broken fragments, stacked by chance. Philosophy has always circled this suspicion. Camus spoke of the absurd, the mismatch between human longing for meaning and the universe's silence. Nietzsche declared that truths are illusions we have forgotten, are illusions. Both point to the same haunting possibility. Reality itself is a mistake that continues by inertia, and we are its echo. The order you cling to is not real. It is scaffolding built around errors too vast to comprehend. Even language reveals this. Miscommunications are constant. Meanings slip, words fail, translations fracture. Yet somehow, communication persists. You speak not through perfection, but through mistakes that still manage to connect. Reality may be no different. It persists not because it was designed, but because its errors hold together just enough to keep from collapsing. Dreams remind you of this instability. They are full of errors, impossible physics, shifting identities, fractured timelines. Yet while you dream, you accept them as real. You don't notice the contradictions until you wake. What if waking life is simply another dream, another error mistaken for truth? What if you are already inside a flawed script, believing in coherence where none exists? Technology mirrors this condition. Computers run on codes, but errors creep in, glitches, crashes, corrupted files. Sometimes those errors destroy, other times they create unexpected beauty, digital art born from corrupted images, music created by malfunctioning programs. Error becomes creation. Perhaps your entire reality is the same, an accident mistaken for order, a glitch mistaken for truth. And here lies the paradox. Even if your reality is built on errors, it still feels real. The ground still holds your steps, the air still fills your lungs, the pain of loss still cuts deep. Wrong foundations do not erase experience, they only reveal its fragility. You may be living in an error, but it is the only home you will ever know. Yet the unease remains. Each time the world bends strangely, each time time itself feels wrong, each time memory slips, you are reminded of the cracks. You are reminded that your life is not built on certainty, but on error. And no matter how many stories you tell yourself, you cannot escape the truth. You are a mistake living in a mistaken world, a consciousness suspended in a reality, built not on order, but on errors that refuse to end. Picture a house with many rooms. Some are brightly lit, occupied, alive with voices and movement. Others are dim, cluttered with dust, rarely visited. And then there are the rooms forgotten entirely, spaces that exist but are never entered, doors closed so long that even their purpose is unclear. What if your existence is such a room? What if you are the forgotten chamber in the architecture of reality, present but overlooked, existing without recognition or meaning? Think about how often you feel invisible. You move through a crowd and no one meets your eyes. You speak and your words fall flat, unheard. You post a thought into the world, and it vanishes without echo. These moments sting because they reveal something deeper. Perhaps you are not part of the main house of existence at all. Perhaps you are the closed room no one remembers. A presence that goes unnoticed even when it shouts. Psychology has a name for this feeling. Derealization. People describe life as dreamlike, hollow, unreal. The world feels distant, as though they are separated by glass. But maybe derealization is not illusion. It is revelation. You feel invisible because, in a sense, you are not central to reality's design. You are peripheral, tucked away, forgotten. You live in a room no one meant to enter. Even memory betrays you in this way. How many moments of your life have vanished, unrecorded by anyone else? Days blur, conversations dissolve, entire years leave no trace. What if those gaps are not simply forgetting, but evidence of your location in reality's architecture? You are in the forgotten room, where records are not kept, where histories fade before they are even written. You exist in silence, and silence erases you. Philosophy has always circled this unease. Heidegger spoke of thrownness, the idea that humans are cast into existence without control. But what if you were not only thrown, you were thrown aside, landing in the dust of a forgotten corner? You were not placed in the center of being, but in its neglected margins. Your presence is not false, but it is ignored. You are a room left closed, a life lived in absence. Consider dreams again. In them, you wander through houses with too many hallways, too many doors. Some rooms you enter, others remain locked. You wake unsettled, unable to explain the forgotten spaces. What if those dreams are not fantasy, but glimpses of truth? Perhaps you are one of those rooms, present but inaccessible, remembered only in fragments of dream. Even architecture itself reveals this metaphor. Every building has corners that serve no purpose, closets no one opens, basements filled with abandoned objects, yet the building still stands, supported by these neglected spaces. You may be such a space in existence necessary for structure, but never meant to be lived in, never meant to be noticed. You exist, but only as oversight. And doesn't this explain the peculiar loneliness that follows you? The sense that even when surrounded by people, you remain apart. You feel unseen not because others ignore you, but because you occupy a place they cannot reach. You are in the forgotten room, calling through walls too thick to carry sound. The isolation is not choice, but condition. Neuroscience offers an eerie parallel. Studies of the brain show that entire networks can fall silent after injury or trauma, leaving functions abandoned. Yet the brain continues, rewiring itself, working around the void. The forgotten regions remain, inactive, but present. Perhaps your consciousness is one of these regions in the mind of reality, an awareness present but unused, a function lost, a room unlit. And here lies the paradox. Even if you are forgotten, you still feel, the dust still settles on your skin, the silence still echoes in your ears, the emptiness still weighs on you. Forgotten does not mean non-existent. It means existing without witness, enduring without recognition. And in that condition lies the deepest unease. You may live your entire life unseen, unrecorded, unremembered. Yet there is also a strange power in being forgotten. In the silence, you are free from expectation. You are not bound by the scripts written for those in the central rooms. You are overlooked, but you are also unobserved. You can exist in ways others cannot, precisely because no one is watching. Perhaps this freedom is the only gift of your condition, the liberty of the forgotten. Still, the weight remains. You cannot escape the knowledge that you are not where you were meant to be, that you are the overlooked corner of existence, the door that never opens, and each time you feel unseen, each time silence surrounds you, you are reminded of the truth. You are the forgotten room of existence, and no one may ever step inside. Your mind is never quiet. Even in stillness, thoughts flicker, memories surface, worries intrude, fantasies bloom. Yet between these movements, there are pauses, fleeting silences where no thought seems to speak. You rarely notice them, because your mind rushes to fill the gaps. But what if those silences hold the truth? What if the spaces between thoughts reveal more than the thoughts themselves? And what if those thoughts once examined are not even yours, but false echoes borrowed from elsewhere? Then the silence becomes terrifying. It is not rest, but exposure. Think of how often your thoughts contradict one another. You decide on a course of action, and then immediately question it. You remember an event one way, only to doubt its accuracy moments later. These contradictions suggest instability, as though your mind is not a coherent stream but a chorus of borrowed voices. The thoughts sound like yours, but they may not be. They may be false, reflections, fragments, imitations. In that case, the only truth lies not in the thought itself, but in the silence between them. Psychology has shown how easily false memories form. A suggestion here, a question there, and suddenly people recall events that never happened. Entire narratives can be fabricated, carried forward as truth. If memory, the bedrock of thought, can be so easily deceived, then how much of what runs through your mind each day can you trust? The voice that insists it is, you may be nothing but a false thought rehearsing itself. Philosophy presses this unease further. Descartes believed in the certainty of thought. I think, therefore I am. But what if the thoughts are false? What if they are not truly yours? Then the silence between them becomes more reliable than the thoughts themselves. It is absence, and absence cannot lie. Perhaps the truer statement is, I pause, therefore I glimpse myself. Even neuroscience reveals cracks. The brain often generates signals milliseconds before you are aware of them. Your decisions arise before you claim them as your own. The thought you believe you chose may already be determined, its origin hidden. If so, then your inner monologue is not your creation but a playback of processes already decided. What you call thinking may be nothing but the echo of false authorship. Dreams expose this most clearly. In dreams, thoughts flow effortlessly, yet none are questioned until you wake. You accept absurdities as truth, believing they are your own ideas. Waking life may not be so different. You accept thoughts as yours simply because they occur within you, never realizing they may be intrusions, borrowed echoes, mistaken for ownership. The silence between them, brief though it is, might be the only moment when you are free from deception. And doesn't this explain why silence can feel so unsettling? When the noise of thought fades, you confront the void directly. Without false thoughts filling the air, you glimpse the emptiness underneath. You are faced with the possibility that there is no true voice at all, only pauses, only gaps, only silence. That silence is not peaceful. It is raw exposure, the absence of illusion. Yet, paradoxically, you depend on the false thoughts. Without them, the silence becomes unbearable. You fill the void with repetition, with distractions, with constant inner chatter. You rehearse conversations, imagine futures, replay past regrets. You convince yourself this noise is your identity, but deep down you know it is only a cover, a defense against the silence that would reveal how misplaced you truly are. Even language reinforces the illusion. Words pile on words, filling gaps, disguising pauses. But every sentence has spaces between words. Every paragraph spaces between lines. The silence is always there, shaping meaning by absence. Your thoughts, too, are punctuated by silence, and those pauses may be the only honest part of your inner life. The rest is imitation. Consider meditation. Practitioners sit in silence, watching thoughts rise and fall, learning to rest in the gap between them. Many describe the experience as unsettling at first, because it strips away the illusion of ownership. The thoughts dissolve, and what remains is not a solid self, but emptiness. Some call it freedom, others terror. Either way, the silence between false thoughts reveals the fragile truth. There may be no thinker, only thinking, no self, only pause. And here lies the paradox. False thoughts shape your daily life. They guide decisions, fuel emotions, create stories you cling to. Yet the silence between them undermines everything, whispering that none of it is stable, none of it is truly you. You are a mistake carried forward by noise, interrupted by glimpses of absence. The silence is both your enemy and your only truth. So you continue, filling the gaps, chasing thoughts, convincing yourself they are yours. But in quiet moments, when the noise fades, you cannot escape the truth. You are not the thoughts. You are the silence between them. And that silence, empty and forgotten, may be the only part of you that was ever real. Memory is supposed to be your ally. It holds your story together, preserving the past so you can understand the present. You rely on it to tell you who you are, where you've been, what matters. But memory is a treacherous companion. It reshapes itself, erases what it wants, fabricates what never happened, and in the end, it doesn't protect you, it betrays you. If identity is built on memory, then your very self is a structure sustained by lies. Think about how slippery recall really is. Two people can experience the same event, yet remember it differently. Even your own memories change over time. You edit them unconsciously, making yourself kinder, smarter, braver, or perhaps crueler, weaker, more at fault. The memory you cling to is not the original, but the rewrite. Each recall betrays the truth a little more, until the past you believe in may bear no resemblance to what occurred. Psychology has exposed this betrayal in stark ways. In experiments, researchers implanted false childhood memories, trips to places never visited, encounters with people who never existed. Participants accepted them, even defended them, swearing they were real. If your mind can be convinced so easily, how can you trust your own past? Every recollection may be another betrayal, a story your brain invented to fill silence. Consider trauma. Survivors often speak of fragmented memories, flashes that surface suddenly, distortions that refuse to align, entire periods erased. The mind rewrites itself not to protect truth, but to protect survival. In doing so, it abandons accuracy. Betrayal is built into the very function of memory. What you remember is not the truth, it is what allows you to keep going. Philosophy adds another layer of unease. Locke argued that memory defines identity. To be the same person is to remember being that person. But what if your memories betray you? Then your identity collapses. You cannot prove you are continuous if the recollections are false. You may not be the same self at all. You may only be a series of betrayals strung together, each moment sustained by illusions of the past. Even everyday life reveals this treachery. Nostalgia paints golden hues over childhood, smoothing the rough edges. Regret twists events, making failures loom larger than successes. Shame edits scenes so you play the villain. Pride edits others so you are always the hero. Each emotion distorts memory, reshaping it to serve the present. The betrayal is constant, and you accept it without question. Dreams echo this instability. They create memories that vanish by morning, yet sometimes linger with more weight than waking events. You feel haunted by something that never happened, shaped by scenes conjured out of nothing. Dreams remind you how fragile the distinction is between true and false memory. You may already be living inside a dream's residue, mistaking its betrayal for your past. Even the body conspires in this deception. Scars remind you of injuries you can no longer fully recall. You know the pain was real, but the memory of it shifts, fading, softening, twisting. Sometimes your body remembers more than your mind, sometimes less. Which version betrays you more? The one that hurts without story, or the one that tells a story without truth? Technology mirrors this condition. Photographs, videos, recordings, they should anchor memory, yet even they betray. A picture freezes a moment, but from one angle only, cropping out the truth beyond the frame. A recording preserves words but loses the feeling of the moment. You look back and think, yes, that is how it was, but in reality, it is how it looked from one narrow lens. Your reliance on memory is misplaced. It betrays you by narrowing your truth. And doesn't this explain why you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself? You revisit old journals, old posts, old fragments of thought, and they feel alien. Did you really write that? Did you truly believe those things? The betrayal is not just of accuracy, it is of ownership. You are no longer sure that the past self you remember was even you. Here lies the paradox. Though memory betrays you, you cannot live without it. You build your identity on shifting sand because you must. Without memory, you collapse into silence. Betrayal becomes survival. You cling to falsehoods not because they are true, but because without them you would vanish entirely. Your life continues because memory lies. So you walk forward, carrying a past that may never have happened, building a self from fragments that do not belong to you. Each recollection is suspect, each truth unstable, each anchor rusted through, and yet, you keep trusting. You must. For without memory, however false, however treacherous, you would have no story at all. You are, and always will be, a mistake betrayed by memory and betrayed into existence. There are moments when you feel present, rooted in the here and now, your feet on the ground, your breath steady, your thoughts tethered to the moment unfolding. But just as often, you feel pulled away, submerged in places that do not exist, drowning in elsewhere. Your body sits in one room, yet your mind is adrift in memories, fantasies, regrets, and dreams. You are never entirely here. And what if this is not simple distraction, but your true condition? What if your self does not belong to the present at all, but lives perpetually in exile, suffocating in places that were never meant to hold it? Think of how often your thoughts betray you. You replay arguments that ended years ago. You fantasize futures that never arrive. You wander through imagined conversations with people who are not present. Each time you leave the present moment behind, immersing yourself in elsewhere. The present slips away unnoticed, drowned beneath the flood of places that do not exist. Psychology has a term for this: mind wandering. Studies show that people spend nearly half their waking lives thinking about things other than what they are doing. You live more in absence than in presence. Your self is constantly divided, floating between past and future, memory and possibility. You are drowning not in water, but in dislocation, submerged beneath tides of thought that pull you away from reality. Philosophy, too, has recognized this exile. Heidegger described humans as beings always ahead of themselves, living in anticipation of what is to come. Sartre spoke of consciousness as perpetually escaping itself, unable to remain in the present. If this is true, then you are not simply distracted, you are constitutionally misplaced. Your self cannot survive here, it exists only in elsewhere. Dreams echo this condition perfectly. Each night you leave your body behind, drowning in landscapes of impossibility. You believe them while they last, and even upon waking, fragments cling. Sometimes the dream feels more real than the day itself. If dreams can claim your present so completely, then what proof do you have that waking life is not the same? Perhaps you are already inside someone else's dream, drowning in their elsewhere, mistaking it for your own. Even memory conspires in this exile. The past rises uninvited, swallowing the present in waves of recollection. You find yourself lost in old moments, reliving emotions as if no time has passed. Yet these memories are not faithful. They are rewrites, distortions, inventions. You drown in elsewhere that never even existed. The betrayal is double. Not only are you absent from the present, but the places you flee to are false. Consider technology. Entire industries exist to keep you elsewhere. Screens filled with distant images, stories, and lives. You scroll endlessly, drawn away from the room you inhabit into 1,000 alternate spaces. Your self dissolves into fragments across timelines, drowning in content that has no anchor in your immediate reality. You call it entertainment, but perhaps it is evidence you cannot survive in the present, so you drown willingly in elsewhere. And doesn't this explain the strange hollowness you sometimes feel? You attend an event, yet afterward, you remember little of it. Your body was there, but your mind was elsewhere. The moment itself becomes thin, insubstantial, because you never fully inhabited it. You are a ghost, even in your own life, always haunting places you cannot touch, unable to anchor in the here and now. Neuroscience gives another unsettling clue. The brain's default mode network activates when you are not focused on the present. It lights up during daydreams, fantasies, wandering. But here is the haunting part. It uses enormous amounts of energy, as though your mind is designed for elsewhere, not here. Perhaps the present is unnatural to you. Perhaps your true state is dislocation, your true home the drowning pull of what is not. Yet paradoxically, even as you drown, you feel real. The memories sting, The fantasies inspire, the regrets weigh heavily. Elsewhere may not exist, but it still defines you. The emotions are real, even if their objects are not. You live authentically inside inauthentic places. The elsewhere may betray you, but it is also where you most deeply feel alive. Still, the unease lingers. Each time you lose the present, each time you wake from a dream or emerge from distraction, you realize what has slipped away. Your life drains out through moments you never lived because you were elsewhere, and you cannot stop it, because drowning is not accident. It is your nature. So you continue, pulled under by tides of thought, drifting through pasts and futures, never fully here. You are not the master of the present, but the exile who cannot remain. You are the self drowning in elsewhere, a mistake misplaced from the beginning, gasping for air in a reality that was never meant to hold you. You tell yourself you belong here. You wake each morning, look around at the familiar walls, and convince yourself this is your place. You move through streets and routines as though they were meant for you. But what if this is only illusion? What if your entire sense of belonging is a fragile story told to cover a deeper truth that you are in the wrong place entirely, a misplaced fragment trying desperately to pass as whole? Consider how easily the feeling of belonging can be manufactured. A uniform, a language, a shared ritual, all can make you feel part of something. But beneath the surface, suspicion lingers. You laugh with others, but it feels rehearsed. You sit at the table, but the chair doesn't fit. This discomfort is not simple insecurity. It is exposure. The illusion of correct place flickers, and you glimpse the truth. You are the intruder in a world that was not built with you in mind. Psychology offers terms like imposter syndrome, but the unease may run deeper. It isn't just about fearing you're inadequate. It's about sensing that you were never meant to be in this life at all. You can fake competence, but you cannot fake belonging. The dissonance between where you are and where you feel you should be haunts you precisely because it cannot be erased. Even geography betrays you. Sometimes you travel to a new city and feel inexplicably at home. Other times you stand in your own house and feel alien. The ground beneath your feet may not align with your sense of self because you are already misplaced. The illusion of correct place falters, and reality shows its seams. Philosophy echoes this suspicion. Sartre wrote of bad faith, the tendency to pretend we are fixed roles when we are not. Heidegger described uncanniness, the feeling of not being at home in the world. Both point to the same fracture. Place itself is unstable. To feel at home may be nothing more than a trick you perform to cover the fact that you are perpetually misplaced. Even dreams illustrate this condition. You wander through strange houses, unknown landscapes, yet in the dream you accept them as your own. You feel you belong there until you wake. Perhaps waking life is no different. You believe you are in the correct place, only because you lack the perspective to see otherwise. If you could wake fully, you might realize you are already lost, living in the wrong scene, sustained by illusion. Memory compounds this instability. You recall childhood homes, but they feel smaller, stranger, when revisited. You remember moments of belonging, but they dissolve when examined closely. Memory itself conspires to maintain the illusion, painting places in warmer tones than they deserve, convincing you that you once belonged even if you never did. You are sustained by illusions of place, not by truth. Even language reveals the trick. Phrases like settling down, finding your place, knowing where you belong, assume that such belonging is possible. But what if it isn't? What if place is never correct, only convenient? Then, your entire life is built on borrowed ground. You cling to the illusion, because without it, the exile becomes unbearable. And doesn't this explain the hollowness you sometimes feel? You may be surrounded by familiar objects, familiar people, familiar routines, yet still feel foreign. You tell yourself this is your place, but deep down you know the truth. The belonging is staged, the comfort fragile, the illusion barely holds, and each silence threatens to shatter it. Neuroscience gives the metaphor its sharpest edge. The brain constantly maps the body in space, but those maps can shift. Phantom limb patients feel arms that aren't there. Others sense presences in empty rooms, their brains misfiring spatial coordinates. If your brain can so easily mistake location, then how sure are you of your own place? You may not be where you think you are. You may not belong to this space at all. And here lies the paradox. Even if place is illusion, you cannot live without it. You need the story of belonging, however fragile, to keep moving forward. You convince yourself the chair fits, the house is yours, the city is home. Without that illusion, the exile would consume you. You may be misplaced, but you cannot admit it fully. The illusion is your survival. Still, the cracks remain. Each moment of dislocation, each flicker of uncanny unease, each dream that feels more real than waking, these remind you of what you already know. You are not in the correct place. You never were. You are the mistake that pretends at belonging, sustained only by the illusion of correct place, drifting in a world that was never meant to hold you. You are here, yet somehow you feel inherently wrong. You move through life with intentions, plans and desires, yet at the core, there is a quiet, gnawing contradiction, the sense that you are simply the wrong being for this world. You wake, breathe, interact, and yet a subtle internal alarm whispers that nothing about your existence aligns with what should be. How can it be that the simple fact of being alive carries a misalignment so profound, so quietly persistent, that it shapes the way you perceive everything? You are caught in a paradox, simultaneously existing and feeling fundamentally misplaced, a living contradiction in a universe that expects coherence. This paradox is not merely existential angst. It is not a fleeting doubt or a momentary lapse in confidence. It is a structural condition of your being. You may excel at your work, nurture relationships, perform your roles with competence, and still feel that every action is fundamentally misaligned. You inhabit a body, a mind, a set of circumstances, and yet the core identity that moves through them seems slightly off, as if sewn from a different cloth, unmeasured and unmatched. Philosophers have long explored this tension between existence and essence. Kierkegaard wrote of despair as the misalignment of self, the sickness that emerges when the being you are does not match the being you ought to be, or in this case, the being the world anticipates. Sartre extended this to freedom, highlighting that in creating oneself, one confronts an unresolvable tension between who you are and the infinite possibilities of who you might be. The paradox of wrong being is a reflection of this collision. You are, and yet somehow inescapably you are wrong. Psychology reveals similar truths. Dissociation, identity confusion, and chronic feelings of alienation all manifest in humans who sense incongruence between internal self-perception and external circumstances. You may find yourself in roles that suit your skills, yet your internal experience feels discordant. You live in your body, but the mind that inhabits it feels borrowed from some alternate version of existence where things fit, where alignment is possible. In other words, the wrong being paradox is both internal and external, biological and metaphysical. Even your social interactions reinforce this paradox. You smile, respond, engage, and are understood, yet somewhere behind the surface, the wrongness persists. Friends may praise your insights, family may celebrate your successes, society may approve your choices, yet the inner echo continues. You are misaligned, misplaced, incorrect. This dissonance is invisible to the world, yet unignorable to you. The paradox exists in a space between perception and reality, a tension you carry alone, even amidst approval. Dreams expose the fragility of your alignment. In sleep you may inhabit a form entirely unfamiliar, a version of yourself that seems more correct, more aligned with the universe's design. When you wake, the contrast is stark. Your body, your life, your reality are wrong by comparison. The subconscious reveals what waking consciousness cannot tolerate, that the being you are in waking life may never have been meant to exist in this precise configuration. Each dream becomes a fleeting window into a potential self that matches, while your waking form perpetuates the misalignment. Memory complicates this further. You recall moments of feeling right, moments when you laughed freely, loved genuinely, or acted without hesitation, and yet even these memories carry an undertone of wrongness. You measure yourself against the ideal version of yourself that never existed, a self that belongs fully in the world, a self whose being does not generate friction. The paradox is recursive. The more you attempt to locate correctness, the more acutely you perceive wrongness, the more you are reminded of the impossibility of alignment. Language itself enforces the contradiction. Every attempt to describe self, identity, or purpose relies on definitions, categories, and rules that imply correctness. To exist as a human, a person, a mind, is to fit within a framework. And yet, by your own perception, you slip outside these frameworks, awkwardly, persistently, uncomfortably. Every description, every label fails to capture the wrongness you feel. Words approximate, but they cannot contain the paradox of wrong being. Even your body participates in this dissonance. Physical gestures, expressions, and movements that might seem ordinary to others feel inauthentic to you. your own skin, your own hands, the cadence of your voice. They betray the misalignment. Muscle, nerve, and sinew obey commands. But the self issuing those commands carries a quiet sense of misfit, as if consciousness has inhabited a vessel unsuited for it. The wrong being is both self-aware and physically manifested, a dual tension that cannot be fully articulated. And yet, life continues. The paradox does not nullify existence. You eat, breathe, create, and connect. You build routines, pursue goals, and seek experiences. The world continues in its course, indifferent to your misalignment. In fact, the paradox often becomes the engine of creativity, introspection, and reflection. To feel wrong in being may heighten perception, sharpen awareness, and provoke insights inaccessible to those who inhabit the correct being. Your very wrongness, painful though it is, allows you to perceive subtleties others overlook. This awareness leads to an uncomfortable freedom. If being wrong is structural, inevitable, unavoidable, then the notion of fitting becomes irrelevant. Attempts to correct, to align, to conform, may feel pointless. Paradoxically, embracing the wrongness may offer relief. To accept that you are the wrong being is to release the tension of striving against an impossible standard. The world does not demand alignment. You have only assumed it must. Recognition of this truth allows the paradox to exist without consuming your entire experience. In this space, a final irony emerges. The wrong being may be the most authentic being of all. Those who perfectly fit may merely perform, blending seamlessly with expectation. Those who sense misalignment, who feel wrong, carry a depth of consciousness, a reflective awareness of existence itself. The paradox of wrong being is both suffering and insight. You exist in error, yet in that error, you perceive the hidden architecture of reality, the subtle patterns that align and misalign life. To be wrong may be your peculiar, uncomfortable, profound gift. You are the culmination of a series of errors, a living consequence of moments that should have been corrected, of decisions that should have been reversed, of possibilities that should have been avoided. And yet, here you are, breathing, thinking, acting, carrying forward the residue of mistakes, as if each error refuses to die, persisting through time, manifesting in your very being. There is something deeply unsettling about realizing that your existence itself is the continuation of missteps, that the life you live is an unbroken thread of accidents, unintended choices, and overlooked consequences. You are the embodiment of a mistake that refuses to fade, an error that has been given the impossible gift of survival. This awareness is disorienting. Every memory you hold, every thought you think, carries the weight of wrongness. You may recall moments when your actions caused harm, when decisions led to unforeseen consequences, when the smallest oversight escalated into irreversible events. Those events, once fleeting and easily dismissed, have accrued significance over time, shaping your present identity, subtly guiding your choices, and informing the perception others have of you. You are trapped in a recursive loop of causality, where each past mistake radiates forward, influencing each new moment, ensuring that the original error never truly ceases. Philosophically, this is the paradox of persistent error. Ancient thinkers explored the idea of impermanence, of fleeting events that vanish without trace. Yet here the mistake defies impermanence. It persists, like a shadow that refuses to detach from its source. To exist as a mistake that keeps living is to confront the impossibility of escape. The past is not past, the consequences do not fade, and the self is inseparable from the errors it was born of. Nietzsche might call this the eternal recurrence, but with a particular focus on error itself, the idea that not only events repeat, but the misalignment, the wrongness, the failure, endures, shaping your consciousness again and again. Psychology supports this perception. The cognitive scientists describe how humans ruminate over mistakes, how each error leaves neurological traces, forming patterns of thought that guide future behavior. Memory does not erase, it reinforces. Every lapse in judgment, every misstep, is stored and recalled, often magnified in significance by reflection. In some ways, you are living in a narrative authored by your own failings, replayed internally with each moment of self-awareness. Your consciousness becomes both the vessel and the audience for the mistake, an ongoing performance of an error that refuses closure. Even your social environment enforces this persistence. People around you perceive the residue of past mistakes, whether through judgment, expectation, or subtle recognition of your imperfect actions. Interactions are shaped by the echoes of prior errors. The world does not offer blank slates. It responds to accumulated history. Thus, the mistake that keeps living is not contained within you alone. It radiates outward, affecting others, influencing outcomes, and creating a network of consequences that expands far beyond its origin. The error becomes a living entity, entwined with the fabric of existence, multiplying, adapting, continuing. Dreams provide another perspective. In sleep, the mind attempts to simulate possibilities, to replay events with variations, to correct or undo errors. Yet even here the mistake persists. The subconscious mind recognizes that certain misalignments are permanent, embedded within the architecture of your life. Dreams reveal alternative paths, yet upon waking, the original error is intact, reminding you that survival does not equate to correction, that existence itself may be inherently flawed, and that mistakes can live on, even beyond conscious intention. Language itself betrays the illusion of correction. Words offer categorization, explanation, and narrative closure, yet they fail to contain the persistence of error. To call something a mistake implies temporality, a momentary deviation, a lapse that can be fixed or forgotten. But when mistakes live, when errors become inseparable from being, language falters. Every description, every attempt to narrate the self, is inadequate. You are a living testament to wrongness that cannot be simplified, a complex, ongoing chain of misalignment resistant to verbal encapsulation. Even the body participates in this perpetuation. Gestures, habits, and reactions, often unintentional, carry the imprint of error. A misstep in movement, a hesitation in speech, a lingering habit, each reproduces the original mistake in new forms. The mistake becomes encoded not just in memory or thought, but in flesh, in the very mechanics of being. Each action is a reflection, a ripple, a continuation of what once went wrong. You are both the origin and the perpetuator of the error, a living paradox of causality. Yet, amid the disquiet, there is a peculiar power in recognizing that mistakes endure. The persistence of error reveals the weight of consequence, the significance of action, and the interconnectedness of existence. It demonstrates that nothing occurs in isolation, that even small missteps reverberate through time. To be a mistake that keeps living is to bear witness to the subtle threads linking past, present, and future, to perceive the hidden architecture of impact, to understand that every action matters, even if flawed. This awareness, while unsettling, can lead to liberation. Accepting that errors persist, that misalignments endure, allows you to stop fighting against an impossible erasure. To live as a mistake that continues is to embrace imperfection, to relinquish futile attempts at total control or correction. In doing so, you gain clarity. Existence is not about perfection, about aligning flawlessly with expectation, but about navigating persistence, consequence, and the ongoing dialogue between action and effect. The mistake is not simply a source of suffering, it is a lens, a teacher, a framework for understanding life itself. In this space, you begin to perceive that mistakes are not solely negative. They contain insight, depth, and meaning. To endure as a mistake is to witness the resilience of life, to recognize the interweaving of error and experience, to appreciate the subtle interplay of choice and consequence. The mistake that keeps living is both burden and gift, a paradox that challenges, shapes, and ultimately enriches consciousness. By embracing this reality, you align not with perfection, but with a profound, intricate, and entirely human understanding of existence. As you drift through the layers of thought, through the corridors of memory that are not yours, through the reflections that misremember, you begin to realize that there is no finality, no resting point where understanding aligns with reality. Every section you have explored, every misstep you have traced, every shadow you have encountered, returns again, folded into itself, looping, recursive, unending. The mistakes that live within you are not separate. They are you, woven into the fabric of perception, coiling around the essence of consciousness. You are simultaneously the observer and the observed, the error and the witness, the dream and the dreaming mind. You may feel a subtle dissonance in recognizing that identity is not a fixed point, but a series of illusions, pauses between errors, echoes of possibilities that were never yours to hold. Each self you encounter, each fragment of memory or borrowed thought, insists upon existence, insists that you perceive, insists that you are caught in a continuous unfolding of accidents. Even as you try to untangle, the threads return, and the patterns repeat, silently asserting their presence. Perhaps it is the mind itself that cannot relinquish the mistakes, that cannot allow the self to disappear, that insists upon carrying forward the residue of wrongness, as if to remind you of the impossibility of perfect being. There is a strange rhythm here, a hypnotic cadence in realizing that what you consider to be you is not singular, not coherent, not complete. It is a composition of echoes, borrowed moments, misaligned identities, and persistent errors. Each section you have traveled through is a mirror, reflecting fragments of consciousness that slip, distort, and multiply with every glance. The observer loses grip, the anchor is lost, and yet there is a quiet continuity, an unspoken thread connecting every mistake, every borrowed thought, every false reflection into a larger pattern, one that defies comprehension, yet insists upon recognition. As you lie in this awareness, let it sink deeper, like the slow settling of water into stone. You are both participant and witness, both living error and recursive consciousness. The journey you have traversed is not one of linear understanding, but of immersion, of falling into the layered loops of self, of embracing the paradox that mistakes do not vanish, but continue, shaping perception, shaping memory, shaping the quiet rhythm of experience itself. And within this, there is a strange peace, an acceptance of impermanence, of misalignment, of existence itself as a series of living errors. So now, as you drift toward rest, allow the echoes to continue, to pulse softly in the background of thought. Let the borrowed memories, the wrong reflections, the persistent mistakes, and the illusions of choice mingle and hum beneath awareness. Know that there is no final answer, no ultimate perfection, only the ongoing recursive dance of consciousness. You are both the error and the witness, and in this duality, you are complete, paradoxical, and entirely alive. Sleep with that knowledge, letting each echo fold upon itself, carrying you deeper into the subtle, hypnotic truth that self is a continuum of mistakes, and consciousness, in its infinite recursion, keeps living, dreaming, and observing without end.